My husband's dad said he should handle our money because women don't need to worry about finances. When I said no, he smirked and said, then don't expect support. My husband, Alex, just said, it's easier this way. I didn't see it coming. I thought Alex and I were a team. I thought we'd make big choices together, especially about money. But I was wrong. I probably missed the warning signs, or maybe I saw them and just looked the other way. When I married Alex, I didn't think I was also signing up for his dad, Richard, to treat me like I was clueless just because I'm a woman. Richard believed women should stay at home, not work or deal with money. He didn't care that I had a degree in accounting, a full-time job, and probably knew more about finances than anyone in their family. To him, I was just a woman, so I didn't get a say. I thought Alex wasn't like him. He never acted that way while we were dating. Sure, he let me make a lot of choices, but I thought it was because he trusted me. What I didn't realize was that he was used to his dad being in charge. He didn't know how to think for himself. Right after we got married, we visited Richard in his big office at home. He had a glass of whiskey in his hand, like he thought he was some kind of big-shot businessman. In our family, he said, sounding smug, the men take care of the money. I laughed. I thought he was joking. I said, that's nice, but Alex and I will handle our money together. He didn't like that. He gave me a look, like I was a little kid saying I wanted to fly to the moon. Then he said, don't expect any support. That's when I realized he wasn't giving advice. He was giving me a choice: let him and Alex control the money, or get cut off. Alex just said, it's easier this way. But easier for who? Not me. At first, it was small stuff. Alex wouldn't tell me about bills he paid or money he moved. He started making money decisions on his own. It was always Dad thinks we should or Dad says it's smart. I tried to ignore it, but then I saw something bad. Our savings account, our joint account, was missing $155,000. I asked Alex, where did the money go? Oh, he said like it was no big deal. Dad moved it into an investment. I stared at him. What do you mean he moved it? He said it's a smart move. He's always handled the family's money. I felt sick. And you just let him? Alex looked at me like I was the crazy one. Why wouldn't I? That's when I knew he'd always pick his dad over me. So I stopped fighting them, or at least, that's what I let them think. I opened my own bank account, quietly switched my paycheck to go there. From then on, I kept my money separate, and I said nothing. But I wasn't done. I gathered proof, bank statements, emails, texts where Richard made financial decisions without me. I saved everything. And then I waited. Things were quiet. Alex didn't notice my paycheck wasn't going into our joint account, or if he did, he didn't say anything. But I knew Richard wasn't finished. Then one night, Alex mentioned another investment Richard wanted to make. Don't worry, he said, eating dinner. Dad says it's low risk, high reward. I dropped my fork. How much this time? He shrugged, not sure, but Dad needs access to the joint account again. I smiled. Okay, but I think the bank added security. They might call me first. Yeah, makes sense, Alex said. The next day, I went to the bank. I told them not to let anyone take money out without calling me first. 3 days later, they called. Mrs. Taylor, someone tried to transfer $20,000. We blocked it. Who tried? I asked. Richard Taylor. Of course. That night, Alex came home like nothing was wrong. A few minutes later, his phone rang. I could hear Richard yelling. The bank won't let me transfer the money. They froze the account. Alex frowned. What? That doesn't make sense. He looked at me. Did you do something? I leaned back. Do what, exactly? The joint account, it's frozen. Maybe because someone was taking money without my permission. Richard was still shouting through the phone. Fix this, Alex. Alex sighed. Just tell the bank to unlock it. Dad needs the money. I stared at him. No. Alex blinked. What? I'm not unfreezing anything, I said. Sophie, you're making this harder than it has to be. Am I? I asked. Because I never agreed to let your dad risk our savings. Alex said, it's not a risk, it's an investment. I laughed. Really? What return are we getting? Any numbers? Silence. Richard yelled, let me talk to Sophie. Alex said, maybe just talk to him. I have nothing to say to him. I stood up. Tell him the money is off limits. Alex didn't answer. That's when I knew, he wasn't just being controlled, he didn't care. I had to act fast. I started digging into Richard's investments. I didn't just want to stop him, I wanted to expose him. And I found something. Richard wasn't just taking from our account, he was stealing from everyone. Alex's brother? His savings were almost gone. His mom? Richard had taken half her retirement. This wasn't just bad judgment. It was theft. And then I found the worst part, a loan for $50,000 in Alex's name. It was taken out 6 months ago. The payments were coming from our joint account. And it had already defaulted. I looked over the loan paperwork. There was still over $40,000 left to pay, and it was all in Alex's name, not Richard's. I felt ice run through my veins. This wasn't just a bad financial move, this was fraud. That night, I acted normal. I cooked dinner, smiled at Alex's dumb jokes, but inside, I was furious. Then Richard called. I put my fork down. Alex answered and put the call on speaker. Richard was furious. Alex, what's going on? The bank flagged a transfer, they're investigating now, they froze the account again. Alex looked confused. Investigating what? What are you talking about? Richard growled. Sophie must have called them again. That woman is ruining everything. I clenched my jaw. Alex rubbed his forehead. Dad, can you calm down? What transfer are you talking about? There was a pause. Then Richard said quietly. The loan payment. I saw the exact moment Alex's brain broke. He stared at the phone. Loan payment? He repeated. Richard sighed like he was explaining to a child. Yes, the business loan, the one in your name. Alex's face turned pale. What do you mean, in my name? I leaned back and watched it all unfold. You took out a loan in my name? Alex yelled, standing up so fast his chair scraped the floor. Richard replied like it was no big deal. The bank wouldn't approve it under my name. I had to. I nearly laughed. He actually admitted it, on speaker. Alex looked crushed. He sank into his chair, holding his head. Dad, that's fraud. Richard snapped. Watch your mouth. I did this for the family. I've handled our finances for years. Don't act like I'm some criminal. That was enough. I grabbed the phone and ended the call. Alex just sat there, stunned. Then he turned to me. Sophie, did you know? I took a deep breath. I found out today. His hands were shaking. What do we do? I almost felt sorry for him, almost. But this was the man who let his father control everything, who told me to trust Richard, who let this happen. So I looked him in the eye and said, We don't do anything. I do. Richard had no idea what was coming. The next day, I made calls. First, the bank. I sent them everything I had, emails, screenshots, proof of Richard using our money without permission. Then, I called Daniel, Alex's brother. Richard's been stealing from you, I said. There was silence. What? Check your accounts, he's been draining them for 2 years. I heard typing, then a sharp breath. Oh my God, what the hell is this? He did the same to us, and to your mom. Daniel swore. That's her retirement fund, she trusts him. She won't for long. Because I was about to expose everything. That night, Richard was hosting a family dinner. A few business friends were there too. He loved pretending to be the wise, successful head of the family. Perfect. Alex didn't argue when I said we were going. He was still in shock. When we walked in, the house was full of people chatting and laughing. Richard was in his glory, whiskey in hand. His wife, Susan, was smiling and talking to guests like nothing was wrong. I saw Daniel by the kitchen. His jaw was tight. We made eye contact. I nodded. It was time. Richard saw us. My boy, and Sophie, come in, have a drink. I smiled. Oh, we should all get a drink. We've got a lot to talk about. Richard laughed. Something exciting? I tilted my head. You could say that. Daniel stepped forward. Hey, Dad, I checked my accounts today. The room got quiet. Richard's smile slipped. Oh? Daniel's voice was sharp. Turns out, I'm missing $70,000. Guests started whispering. Richard laughed awkwardly. I made some investments for you. Oh yeah? The bank calls it theft, Daniel snapped. Susan looked confused. What's going on? I stepped in. Oh, Susan, you're going to want to hear this. Richard stole from all of us, even you. Her face fell. What? I turned to the room. Here's what happened. Richard drained our savings. He took out a business loan in Alex's name. He moved money from everyone's accounts, without permission. I looked at Susan. He emptied half your retirement fund. Did you know that? Her eyes widened. Richard? Richard's face turned red. Now hold on. I cut him off. We have proof, bank records, emails, and we've reported it. The guests looked shocked. Some were already pulling out their phones. Susan stepped toward him. Is this true? Richard tried to stay calm. I was just moving things around. I didn't mean. Without telling anyone? Danielle shouted. You lied. Susan's voice cracked. You said our money was safe. It's just a temporary. I stepped closer. It's fraud. Then I dropped the final bomb. The bank's launching an investigation. This isn't just a setback, it's a crime. The room gasped. For the first time, Richard looked truly scared. After the guests left, Richard yelled at Alex. You let her do this. You let your wife tear this family apart. Alex stared at him. You tore it apart. Susan packed a bag and left. She didn't say much, but she left. Daniel went no contact. As for Alex, he broke down. He kept apologizing, saying he didn't know, that he should have listened. I believed him, but I couldn't trust him anymore. So I did what I should have done a long time ago. I filed for divorce. The bank moved fast. They froze Richard's accounts. The fraud investigation picked up speed. And the loan? Since it was in Alex's name, Richard thought we'd be stuck with it. Too bad for him. The bank found forged signatures. That meant one thing, Richard was fully responsible. He lost everything, his money, his home, his family. And then came the best part. Richard was arrested for financial fraud. As they cuffed him and walked him out of his house, I looked him in the eye and said, I told you I'd handle my own money.
I was sitting at my desk, surrounded by blueprints and zoning regulations when the email notification popped up. It was a routine check of our joint account, something I did every month to ensure everything was in order. But this time, something was off. A series of transactions, all substantial, were listed under Nate's name. They were not the usual grocery or utility payments. Instead, they were payments to a name I didn't recognize, and they had been going on for months. My name is Alara, and I'm an urban planner. I love my job, creating spaces that bring people together. But right now, all I could feel was a knot tightening in my stomach. Nate and I had always been open about our finances, or so I thought. This discovery felt like a crack in the foundation of my life, threatening to crumble everything I'd worked so hard to build. I tried to shake off the unease that settled over me, telling myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe it was a business expense or a surprise he was planning. But the amounts were too large and too frequent to be anything innocent. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, the numbers blurring together as my mind raced. Hey, Alara, you okay? Tessa's voice pulled me back to reality. She stood at my office door, her usual smile replaced with concern. Yeah, just a bit distracted, I replied, trying to sound casual. But Tessa knew me too well to be fooled. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Distracted by what? She pressed, settling into the chair across from me. I hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. But Tessa had been my rock through so many storms. It's Nate. I found some transactions on our account. They don't make sense. Her eyebrows shot up. Have you talked to him about it? Not yet. I don't want to jump to conclusions, I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were a flimsy excuse. Tessa nodded, her eyes thoughtful. Well, maybe it's nothing. But if it's bothering you, you should ask him. I nodded, though the idea of confronting Nate filled me with a sense of dread. What if it was something serious? What if it was the beginning of an unraveling I wasn't prepared to face? Later that evening, I sat across from Nate at the dinner table, the usual comfort of our shared meal tainted by the questions swirling in my mind. He was talking about his day, something about a project deadline, but I barely heard him. I was too focused on the way he avoided eye contact, the slight tension in his shoulders. Nate, I interrupted, my voice firmer than I felt. I noticed some transactions on our account. They're pretty significant. He paused, fork halfway to his mouth. Oh, those. Yeah, I meant to tell you. It's just some investments I've been making. Investments. The word hung between us, heavy and unsatisfying. Investments. I echoed, trying to keep my tone even. He nodded too quickly. Yeah, just trying to build something for our future. I wanted to believe him desperately. But there was something in his eyes, a flicker of something that made my skin prickle with unease. Can you show me the details? I'd love to know more about it. He hesitated just for a moment, but it was enough. Sure, I'll show you later. It's all pretty boring stuff. I forced a smile, though my mind was screaming. Later. It was always later. And I couldn't shake the feeling that later would never come. That night, as I lay in bed beside him, listening to his steady breathing, I knew I couldn't let it go. This wasn't just about money. It was about trust, and the gnawing fear that there was more beneath the surface than I dared to imagine. I decided then that I needed to know the truth, no matter the cost. As I drifted into a restless sleep, I resolved to dig deeper, to uncover whatever secrets Nate was hiding. Because if I didn't, I feared I might lose everything I held dear. The next morning, I woke with a sense of determination. I would find out what was going on, and I wouldn't stop until I had answers. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would change everything I thought I knew about my life and the man I loved. The morning after my discovery, I found myself at Lorraine's doorstep, clutching a tray of muffins as a peace offering. Lorraine had always been warm, treating me like her own daughter. But lately, she'd been distant, her calls less frequent, her hugs less tight. I needed to know if she had noticed anything strange about Nate, too. Lorraine opened the door, surprise flickering across her face before she pulled me into a hug. It was warm, but there was a hesitation I couldn't ignore. "Alara, what a lovely surprise," she said, ushering me inside. The house smelled of lavender and fresh coffee, a comforting mix that reminded me of simpler times. We settled in her cozy kitchen, and I watched her pour coffee into 2 mismatched mugs. "How are things with you and Nate?" she asked, her tone casual but her eyes sharp. I hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. "We're working through some things," I said, choosing my words carefully. "Have you noticed anything different about him lately?" Lorraine's hand paused mid-pour, a slight tremor that spoke volumes. "He's been busy, I suppose. The work can be demanding." There it was again, that hint of something unsaid. "He's been making some big financial decisions," I said, trying to gauge her reaction. She nodded too quickly. "Nate's always been ambitious. I'm sure he has a plan." A plan. I wanted to believe that, but the doubt gnawed at me. "I just wish he'd talk to me about it," I admitted, my voice softer. Lorraine reached across the table, her hand warm on mine. "Men can be foolish sometimes, Alara. But Nate loves you. I'm sure he'll come around." I wanted to believe her, but the uncertainty lingered. As I left her house, I couldn't shake the feeling that Lorraine knew more than she was letting on. Her words were reassuring, but the tension in her eyes told a different story. Back at home, I found Nate in his office, his brow furrowed in concentration as he typed away. I watched him for a moment, trying to reconcile the man I loved with the stranger he seemed to be becoming. "Nate!" I called softly, stepping into the room. He looked up, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey, everything okay?" I nodded, though my heart was pounding. "I went to see your mom today." His fingers paused over the keyboard, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face. "Oh? How is she?" "She's good. We talked about you." I watched him carefully, hoping for a sign, anything that would make sense of the knots in my stomach. Nate leaned back in his chair, his expression guarded. "And she said you've been busy. I wish you'd talk to me about what's going on." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Alara, I'm trying to handle it. I don't want to worry you." "But I am worried," I said, my voice firmer than before. "I'm your wife, Nate. We're supposed to handle things together. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a moment I thought I saw a crack in his defenses. But just as quickly it was gone. I promise I'll explain everything soon. That promise hung in the air, fragile and unconvincing. I nodded, though my mind was already racing ahead, plotting my next move. If Nate wouldn't tell me the truth, I'd have to find it myself. Later that night, I called Tessa, my heart pounding as I filled her in on my conversation with Lorraine and Nate's evasiveness. "This doesn't sound good, Alara," she said, her voice crackling over the line. "What's your next step?" "I need to dig deeper," I said, determination hardening my resolve. "I can't keep living in this uncertainty." "Do you want me to help?" Tessa offered, her loyalty unwavering. I hesitated, knowing the risk but needing her support. "Yes. I could use all the help I can get." As we hung up, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever Nate was hiding, I was going to find out. And with Tessa by my side, I knew I wasn't alone in this fight. The next morning, I woke with a plan. I would start by looking into Nate's recent activities, checking his emails and phone records, anything that might give me a clue. It was a step I never thought I'd have to take, but desperate times called for desperate measures. Little did I know, the truth I was about to uncover would be more shocking than I could have ever imagined, setting me on a path that would test every ounce of strength I had. I sat at my computer, the room dimly lit by the glow of the screen. My heart pounded as I navigated through Nate's email account, the one he never mentioned. It had taken a few guesses and a lot of nerve to crack his password, but here I was, staring at a digital Pandora's box. The first few emails were mundane, work updates, newsletters, spam. But then I found them. A thread of messages with a woman named Emily. My breath caught as I clicked on one, my eyes scanning the words that confirmed my worst fears. "Can't wait to see you this weekend. Miss you so much," read one email, signed with a heart emoji. My stomach twisted as I read on, each message a dagger, revealing a relationship that was far more than just friendship. Emily. I'd never heard of her, but she seemed to know Nate intimately. The emails spoke of shared weekends, whispered secrets, plans for a future that didn't include me. My hands shook as I closed the laptop, the betrayal cutting deeper than I'd imagined. I needed air, space to think. I grabbed my coat and headed out, the cool evening air doing little to calm the storm inside me. I found myself walking to Tessa's apartment, my feet moving on autopilot. She opened the door, her face immediately falling as she saw mine. "Alara, what happened?" she asked, pulling me inside. "I found his emails," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "He's been seeing someone else." Tessa's eyes widened in shock, but she quickly pulled me into a hug. "Oh, Alara, I'm so sorry." We sat on her couch, the reality of my situation settling in like a heavy fog. "I don't know what to do," I admitted, my voice cracking. "You don't have to decide anything right now," Tessa said gently. "But you need to confront him." I nodded, though the thought of facing Nate filled me with dread. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, the ground crumbling beneath me. "I don't even know who he is anymore." Tessa squeezed my hand. "You're strong, Alara. You'll get through this." Her words were a balm, but the path ahead felt impossibly daunting. I stayed with her that night, unable to face Nate, unable to pretend everything was normal. The next day, I returned home, my mind made up. I needed answers, and I needed them now. Nate was in the kitchen, sipping coffee, his demeanor casual, as if our world wasn't about to implode. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He looked up, a hint of wariness in his eyes. "Sure, what's up?" I took a deep breath, the words heavy on my tongue. "Who is Emily?" His expression shifted, a flicker of panic quickly masked by feigned confusion. "Emily? What are you talking about?" "I saw the emails, Nate. All of them," I said, my voice rising with each word. "You've been lying to me." He set his mug down, his facade crumbling. "Alara, I can explain." "Explain what?" "That you're married to someone else?" That you've been living a double life? The words tumbled out, raw and accusatory. Nate's shoulders slumped, the fight leaving him. It's complicated. Complicated. The word felt like a slap. You think? I snapped, anger finally breaking through the numbness. How long has this been going on? He hesitated, and in that moment I knew the truth was worse than I'd imagined. A few years, he admitted, his voice barely audible. Years. My world tilted, the betrayal cutting deeper than any wound. Why, Nate? Why would you do this? I didn't mean for it to happen, he said, his voice desperate. I was in a bad place, and I cut him off, unable to hear more excuses. You've been lying to me, to your family. How could you? He reached for me, but I stepped back, the distance between us suddenly insurmountable. I'm sorry, Alara. I never wanted to hurt you. The apology felt hollow, a bandage on a gaping wound. I need time, I said, my voice breaking. I can't do this right now. I turned and walked away, the weight of his betrayal pressing down on me. As I left the house, I realized that justice and revenge were no longer abstract concepts. They were my reality, and I was determined to find a way to reclaim my life from the wreckage Nate had left behind. I returned to work, trying to bury myself in the comforting chaos of urban planning. But the betrayal lingered like a shadow, seeping into every corner of my mind. My colleagues noticed my distraction, but I brushed off their concern with forced smiles and half-hearted reassurances. The project I was working on, a new community park, had been my passion for months. It was supposed to be a place of connection and joy, a symbol of hope. But now it felt like just another task on a never-ending list, overshadowed by the turmoil in my personal life. One afternoon, as I was reviewing plans, my phone buzzed. It was Lorraine. Her voice was strained, a hint of something urgent beneath her usual calm. Alara, can we meet? She asked, skipping the pleasantries. Of course, I replied, sensing the weight in her words. Is everything okay? She hesitated, and that pause spoke volumes. I'll explain when we meet. Can you come over later? I agreed, my curiosity piqued and my anxiety rising. What could be so important that she couldn't tell me over the phone? When I arrived at Lorraine's, she greeted me with a tight smile. We settled in her living room, the air thick with unspoken words. I've been doing some thinking, she began, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. About Nate and everything that's happened. I nodded, urging her to continue. And I've been supporting him financially, she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. He told me it was for you, for your career. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. For me, I echoed, disbelief coloring my voice. She nodded, her eyes filled with regret. I thought I was helping, but now, I'm not so sure. The room seemed to close in around me, the implications of her revelation settling heavily on my shoulders. Nate had not only betrayed me, but had used Lorraine's generosity to cover his tracks. I'm so sorry, Alara, Lorraine said, her voice breaking. I didn't know. I reached out, squeezing her hand. It's not your fault. He's been lying to both of us. We sat in silence, the weight of our shared betrayal hanging between us. It was a turning point, a moment that forced me to reevaluate everything I thought I knew about Nate and our marriage. I need to confront him, I said finally, determination hardening my resolve. I can't let this continue. Lorraine nodded, her expression fierce. And I'll be right there with you. We deserve answers. As I left her house, a plan began to form. I would gather more evidence, confront Nate with the truth, and demand accountability. It was time to take control of my life, to stop being the victim of his deceit. The following days were a blur of activity. I spent hours combing through bank statements, emails, anything that could give me more insight into Nate's double life. Meanwhile, Tessa helped me piece together a timeline, her support unwavering. But just as I felt I was gaining ground, an unexpected twist shattered my fragile sense of control. I received a call from Harold Mercer, a name I recognized from Nate's emails. He was Emily's father. "Elara, I'm not sure how to say this," Harold began, his voice filled with an unfamiliar tension. "But I think there's something you need to know about Nate." My heart pounded as I listened, each word confirming my worst fears. Nate had married Emily under false pretenses, using Lorraine's money to fund a life I knew nothing about. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Because Emily passed away recently," Harold said, grief threading through his words. "And I found some documents that didn't add up. Nate's been lying to us too." The revelation hit me like a tidal wave, the magnitude of Nate's betrayal more profound than I'd imagined. I thanked Harold, promising to keep in touch, though my mind was already spinning with the implications. This new information shifted everything. Nate's deceit was deeper and more calculated than I'd realized, affecting not just me but another family. The stakes were higher, the need for justice more urgent. I met with Lorraine and Tessa that evening, sharing what I'd learned. Together, we devised a plan to confront Nate, to hold him accountable for the web of lies he'd spun. As I prepared for the confrontation, I felt a shift within me. The desire for revenge was tempered by a deeper need for justice, not just for myself but for everyone Nate had hurt. It was time to face him, to demand the truth, and to reclaim my life from the chaos he'd created. The day of the funeral arrived, a somber occasion clouded by the storm of revelations and deceit. Lorraine and I had decided it was the perfect setting to confront Nate. The irony of exposing his lies at a funeral for a mother who wasn't even dead was not lost on us. We arrived together, the tension between us a shared burden. Lorraine's face was set in determination, her usual warmth replaced by a steely resolve. I felt the same fire burning within me, fueled by the need for justice and the desire to reclaim control over my life. The Mercers were there, Harold and Diana, dressed in black, their faces etched with grief. I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for them, unwitting victims of Nate's web of lies. As we entered the hall, Nate spotted us. For a moment, I saw a flicker of panic in his eyes before he masked it with a smile. He approached us, his demeanor as charming as ever, but I could see the cracks beneath the surface. "Lorraine, Elara, I'm glad you could make it," he said, his voice smooth but lacking sincerity. Lorraine didn't waste any time. "We need to talk, Nate. Now." He glanced around, the tension between us palpable. "Can it wait?" "This isn't the time or place." I stepped forward, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "No, Nate. It can't wait." Reluctantly, he led us to a quieter corner, away from the mourners. The moment we were out of earshot, Lorraine turned on him, her voice low and fierce. "How could you do this, Nate?" "To us, to them." He opened his mouth, but no excuse came. Instead, he looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Elara, I'm sorry. I never wanted it to go this far." "Sorry doesn't fix this," I said, my voice breaking. "You've lied to everyone. You've used your mother's money to fund a life I knew nothing about." Nate ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched on his face. "I was in over my head. I thought I could fix it before anyone found out." Lorraine shook her head, disappointment heavy in her gaze. "You've hurt so many people, Nate. This isn't something you can just fix." The conversation was interrupted by Harold's approach, his expression a mix of sorrow and anger. "What's going on here?" I hesitated, unsure of how to explain without causing more pain. But Lorraine stepped in, her voice gentle but firm. "Harold, there's something you need to know about Nate." As she spoke, revealing the truth of Nate's deceit, I watched Harold's face shift from confusion to disbelief. Diana joined us, her eyes wide with shock as the reality of Nate's betrayal sank in. Nate's shoulders slumped, the weight of his actions finally crashing down on him. "I never meant for any of this to happen," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Harold's response was cold, his words cutting through the air like a knife. "You've torn our family apart, Nate. How could you?" Confrontation left Nate reeling, his charm stripped away to reveal a man lost in his own lies. As he stood there, exposed and vulnerable, I realized that my desire for revenge had been replaced by a need for closure, for healing. But just as I thought the worst was over, an unexpected twist shattered any illusion of resolution. Diana turned to me, her voice trembling with a new revelation. "Alara, there's something else. Emily was pregnant when she passed." The words hung in the air, a new layer of betrayal that took my breath away. Nate had not only deceived us but had left a child without a father, a family without answers. I looked at Nate, my heart aching with a mix of anger and pity. "What have you done?" I asked, my voice raw with emotion. He couldn't meet my gaze, his silence a confirmation of his guilt. The situation had spiraled beyond anything I could have imagined, leaving me questioning everything I thought I knew about justice and revenge. As we left the hall, I felt Lorraine's hand on my shoulder, her presence a comforting anchor in the chaos. "We'll get through this, Alara," she said softly, her words a promise of solidarity. In that moment, I understood that justice wasn't just about retribution. It was about finding strength in the face of betrayal, about rebuilding from the ashes of trust. And as I walked away from the wreckage of Nate's lies, I knew I had the support I needed to face whatever came next. The aftermath of the funeral confrontation left me feeling hollow, as if the ground beneath me had vanished. The revelation of Emily's pregnancy was a blow I hadn't anticipated, a twist that made Nate's betrayal even more monstrous. How could I have been so blind to the man I thought I knew? Back at home, the silence was deafening. Nate had left, his absence a gaping void in the house we had shared. I wandered from room to room, each space filled with memories that now felt tainted. My mind was a storm of anger, hurt, and confusion, each emotion crashing into the next. I found myself in the kitchen, staring at the table where we'd shared countless meals. The weight of everything pressed down on me, and I sank into a chair, my head in my hands. How had it come to this? How had my life unraveled so completely? The doorbell rang, jolting me from my thoughts. I opened the door to find Tessa, her expression a mix of concern and determination. She stepped inside, pulling me into a hug that I didn't know I needed until that moment. "Alara, I'm here," she said simply, her presence a balm to my frayed nerves. We sat together, and I filled her in on the latest revelations. Her eyes widened with each new detail, disbelief etched on her face. "I can't believe he's done this," she said, shaking her head. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted, my voice small. "I feel like I'm drowning." Tessa squeezed my hand, her grip firm and reassuring. "You're not alone, Alara. We'll figure this out together." Her words were a lifeline, but the path ahead felt impossibly daunting. As we talked, I realized that my desire for revenge had given way to a deeper need for justice. Not just for myself, but for Emily and her unborn child. But just as I thought I was beginning to find my footing, another twist sent me spiraling. My phone buzzed with a message from Lorraine, her words a fresh blow to my fragile sense of stability. "Alara, I've just received some legal papers. Nate's trying to access my accounts," the message read. I stared at the screen, disbelief turning to anger. Even now, Nate was still trying to manipulate and deceive, his desperation driving him to new lows. It was a stark reminder of just how far he'd fallen, and how far I still had to go to protect myself and those around me. I called Lorraine, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and determination. "We need to stop him, Lorraine. He can't keep getting away with this." She agreed, her voice steady despite the turmoil. "I'll do whatever it takes to protect us, Alara. We'll get through this." As I hung up, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I couldn't let Nate continue to wreak havoc on our lives. It was time to take decisive action, to ensure that he faced the consequences of his actions. The next few days were a blur of legal consultations and strategy sessions with Lorraine and Tessa. We gathered evidence, prepared statements, and fortified our defenses against Nate's attempts to further manipulate the situation. But as we worked, the weight of everything began to take its toll. I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, the constant stress leaving me feeling frayed at the edges. Every time I thought I was making progress, another complication would arise, threatening to undo everything. One evening, as I sat alone in my living room, the enormity of it all crashed over me. I felt like I was fighting a battle I couldn't win, the odds stacked against me at every turn. The idea of justice felt like a distant dream, overshadowed by the relentless reality of Nate's deceit. In that moment, I realized I was at my lowest point. Path to reclaiming my life seemed impossibly long, the obstacles insurmountable. But even as despair threatened to overwhelm me, a small voice inside reminded me of the strength I'd found in Lorraine, Tessa, and even myself. I took a deep breath, the air filling my lungs with renewed resolve. I couldn't give up, not now. I had to keep fighting, not just for myself, but for everyone Nate had hurt. It was time to turn the tide, to reclaim my life from the chaos and find a way forward. With that thought, I rose from the couch, determination hardening my resolve. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't let Nate's lies define me. I was stronger than this, and I would find a way to rise above it all. The day I discovered I was pregnant was a storm of emotions. I stood in the bathroom, staring at the positive test, my mind racing. The revelation was both a blessing and a burden, a new life amidst the chaos Nate had created. Forced me to reevaluate everything, to consider not just my future but that of my unborn child. I knew I had to confront Nate one last time, not just for me but for the life growing inside me. The thought of my child being dragged into his web of deceit was unbearable. I needed to ensure that Nate faced the consequences of his actions, not just for the past but for the future. With Lorraine and Tessa by my side, we arranged to meet Nate at a neutral location, a park we'd once loved, now a battlefield for truth. As we arrived, the air was thick with tension, the weight of what was to come pressing down on us. Nate was already there, pacing nervously, his usual confidence replaced by a palpable anxiety. As we approached, he stopped, his eyes flicking between us, searching for answers in our expressions. "Alara, what's this about?" he asked, trying to maintain a veneer of calm. I took a deep breath, the gravity of the moment settling over me. "We need to talk, Nate. About everything." His gaze shifted to Lorraine, then Tessa, a flicker of fear in his eyes. "I've already explained. I was desperate. I didn't mean for things to get out of hand. Desperate." Lorraine's voice was sharp, cutting through the air. "You used me, Nate. You lied to everyone." Nate's eyes pleaded with her, but Lorraine's expression was steely, unmoved by his charm. "I thought I could fix it," he said, his voice cracking. I stepped forward, my resolve unwavering. "You can't fix this, Nate. You've hurt too many people." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine for a hint of forgiveness. "Alara, please. I love you. I never wanted to lose you." The words hung between us, but they felt hollow, a last-ditch effort to salvage something from the wreckage. "Love isn't enough, Nate. Not when it's built on lies." The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken truths. I could see the wheels turning in Nate's mind, the realization that his charm and excuses would no longer save him. Then, in a move I hadn't anticipated, Nate turned to Lorraine, desperation coloring his voice. "Mom, you know I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just trying to help Alara." Lorraine's expression softened, but only slightly. "I believed in you, Nate. But you need to take responsibility." Confrontation was reaching its peak, the tension crackling like electricity. I knew it was time to reveal my final card, the one thing that changed everything. "I'm pregnant, Nate," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "And I won't let our child be part of this mess." His face blanched, the color draining as the weight of my words hit him. "Pregnant?" he echoed, disbelief mingling with something akin to fear. "Yes," I confirmed, my hand instinctively resting on my stomach. "This changes everything." The revelation shifted the dynamic, adding a new layer of complexity to the confrontation. Nate's eyes darted between us, the reality of the situation sinking in. "I want to be there for you, for our child," he said, his voice tinged with desperation. I shook my head, the decision already made. "You need to prove you can change, Nate. Until then, I can't trust you." The words were a final blow, the culmination of everything we'd been through. Nate's shoulders slumped, the fight leaving him as the reality of his actions settled over him. As we stood there, the core themes of justice and protection came into sharp focus. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about ensuring a safe future for my child, about breaking free from the cycle of deceit. With Lorraine and Tessa beside me, I knew I wasn't alone. Together, we'd face whatever came next, armed with the knowledge that we'd done everything we could to seek justice and protect those we loved. As we turned to leave, I felt a sense of closure, a glimmer of hope amidst the chaos. Path ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to face it, determined to build a life grounded in truth and resilience. In the months following the confrontation, life slowly began to find its rhythm again. The storm that Nate had unleashed left scars, but it also revealed unexpected blessings and new beginnings. Community Park Project, which had once felt overshadowed by personal chaos, became my sanctuary. It was a space where I could channel my energy and passion, creating something beautiful and lasting for others. Lorraine and I grew closer, our bond forged in the fires of betrayal and resilience. She became a constant presence, offering support and wisdom as I navigated the complexities of impending motherhood. Together, we found strength in each other, a newfound family built on honesty and shared experiences. One afternoon, as we sat together in the park, Lorraine turned to me, her expression thoughtful. "You know, Alara, I've been thinking a lot about the future." I nodded, sensing the weight of her words. "What about it?" "I've decided to include you and the baby in my will," she said, her voice steady and filled with warmth. The gesture took me by surprise, a testament to the depth of our connection. "Lorraine, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," she replied, her eyes soft with affection. "You're family now, and I want to make sure you're taken care of." Her words were a balm, a reminder that even amidst the chaos, there were moments of grace and kindness. It was a resolution I hadn't anticipated, a final twist that solidified our bond and offered a sense of security for the future. As the days turned into weeks, the whispers of Nate's deceit faded, replaced by the laughter and life of the community I was helping to build. Park became a symbol of renewal, a place where people could come together and create new memories, just as I was doing. One evening, as I was leaving the office, I received a call from Harold Mercer. His voice was calm, a stark contrast to the turmoil of our last encounter. "Alara, I wanted to thank you," he said, gratitude evident in his tone, "for everything you did. It couldn't have been easy." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "It wasn't, but I'm glad we found the truth." "There's something else," he continued, a hint of hesitation in his voice. "We've decided to start a foundation in Emily's name, to help others who might be in similar situations." The news was unexpected, a resolution that added a layer of depth to the journey we'd all been on. "That's wonderful, Harold." Emily would be proud. As I hung up, I felt a sense of closure, a realization that even in the darkest times, light could be found. It was a reminder that justice wasn't just about punishment, but about healing and growth. With the foundation of my new life solidifying, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. The themes of revenge and justice had evolved, revealing the true power of resilience and the importance of protecting those we love. But even as I embraced the future, I knew some questions would remain unanswered. Nate's actions had left a mark, a lingering reminder of the complexity of human relationships and the choices we make. As I walked through the park, the evening sun casting long shadows, I felt the gentle flutter of life within me. It was a promise of new beginnings, a testament to the strength I'd found in adversity. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had taught me the value of truth and the power of forgiveness. And as I looked toward the future, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them with courage and hope. Path wasn't always clear, but with the support of those around me, I was confident in my ability to navigate whatever came next. The story of Nate's deceit had come to an end, but my story was just beginning, filled with the promise of new life and the enduring strength of the human spirit.
It was a typical Tuesday morning when my world tilted on its axis.
I was sipping my lukewarm coffee, trying to muster the energy to tackle the endless spreadsheets waiting for me at work, when my laptop pinged with a new email. The subject line read, "For your eyes only." It was the kind of message that made your stomach drop before you even opened it. My name is Harper, and I'm an urban planner with a knack for finding the beauty in chaos. I've spent years designing spaces that bring people together, but nothing could prepare me for the mess I was about to dive into. I've been engaged to Ethan for a year, and while most of our relationship has been a dream, his family has always been a thorn in our side. Especially Vanessa, his sister, whose presence is as overwhelming as her social media following. Curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked on the email. It was anonymous, filled with screenshots of financial transactions that didn't make sense. Money was being siphoned from Ethan's accounts, and the name attached to these transactions was none other than Vanessa Calloway. My heart raced as I scrolled through the evidence. It felt like a scene from a bad thriller, but this was my life. I sat there, staring at the screen, my mind a whirlpool of confusion and disbelief. Was this real? Could Vanessa really be stealing from her brother? And why would someone send this to me? The questions buzzed around my head like angry bees. As I closed the laptop, I felt a chill run down my spine. There was no denying it. Something was seriously wrong. Ethan walked into the room, his hair still damp from his morning shower. "Hey, you ready for work?" he asked, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. "Yeah, just finishing up some last-minute stuff," I replied, forcing a smile. My voice was steady, but my hands were shaking. I wanted to tell him, to lay everything out and demand answers. But a part of me hesitated. What if there was more to this than just Vanessa's greed? What if I was missing a piece of the puzzle? Ethan leaned over and kissed my forehead, his touch warm and reassuring. "You okay? You look a bit distracted." "Just thinking about work," I lied, my stomach twisting with guilt. I hated keeping things from him, but I needed time to think, to figure out the best way to protect him without causing unnecessary pain. As I watched him leave for the office, I felt a pang of regret. I knew I couldn't sit on this information forever. But for now, I needed to gather more evidence, to understand the full picture before confronting him. I took a deep breath and decided to do some digging of my own. Throughout the day, I tried to focus on my work, but my mind kept drifting back to that email. I replayed every interaction I'd had with Vanessa, searching for signs I might have missed. She was always so charming, so effortlessly confident. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe her charisma was just a mask, hiding something darker underneath. I spent my lunch break scrolling through Vanessa's social media, looking for anything that could hint at financial trouble or desperation. But all I saw were perfectly curated images of exotic vacations, designer clothes, and glamorous parties. It was a life that seemed far removed from any financial woes. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story. By the time I got home, I was exhausted, both physically and mentally. Ethan was already there, cooking dinner, the smell of garlic and herbs filling the air. He looked up as I entered, a smile lighting up his face. "Hey, how was your day?" "It was interesting," I replied, trying to sound casual. But inside, I was a bundle of nerves, wound tight and ready to snap. As we sat down to eat, I knew I had to make a decision. I couldn't keep this to myself any longer. But how do you tell the person you love that their own sister might be betraying them? I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. And then, just as I was about to speak, my phone buzzed with another email notification. I glanced at the screen, my heart skipping a beat as I read the subject line, "You're not safe." The word sent a shiver down my spine, and I knew this was just the beginning. Whatever was happening, it was bigger than I'd imagined, and I was right in the middle of it. The Calloway family dinners were always a test of endurance. Margaret's dining room was a shrine to tradition, with its heavy drapes and antique china, a stark contrast to the tension simmering beneath the surface. As Ethan and I stepped inside, I could feel the weight of expectations settling over me like a too-tight sweater. Margaret greeted us with a polite smile, her eyes scanning me with the precision of a seasoned banker assessing a risky investment. "Harper, dear, so lovely to see you," she said, her voice smooth but lacking warmth. "Thank you, Margaret. It's nice to be here,"
I replied, matching her tone. Ethan squeezed my hand, a silent pledge of solidarity amidst the storm. Vanessa was already at the table, scrolling through her phone with the practiced indifference of someone who knew the world was watching her every move. She looked up, flashing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Hey, Harper. Loving the outfit. Very urban chic. I nodded, trying not to roll my eyes. Thanks, Vanessa. You look great too, I replied, my words as hollow as hers. Dinner commenced with the usual small talk, the kind that danced around the real issues without ever addressing them. Margaret asked Ethan about work, her questions pointed and probing, while Vanessa interjected with stories of her latest influencer escapades. Ethan played along, his laughter a little too forced, his eyes darting to me every so often as if checking to make sure I was still there. As the evening wore on, Margaret turned her attention to me. So, Harper, how's the planning world treating you? Still building those inclusive communities? I nodded, keeping my smile fixed. Yes, it's going well. We've just started a new project downtown. It's exciting to see how we can transform spaces to bring people together. Interesting, Margaret replied, her tone suggesting otherwise. I suppose it's quite a challenge, trying to make everyone happy. It is, I agreed. But it's worth it when you see the impact it can have. Vanessa leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with mischief. Speaking of challenges, Harper, I heard you've been quite busy lately. Anything new on your plate? Her words were innocent enough, but there was an edge to them, a subtle jab that made my skin prickle. I met her gaze, refusing to flinch. Just the usual work stuff. Nothing too exciting. Ethan shifted in his seat, sensing the undercurrent, but unsure how to navigate it. Vanessa, have you thought about collaborating with Harper on one of her projects? Your influence could really bring attention to the cause. Vanessa laughed, a tinkling sound that felt rehearsed. Oh, Ethan, I don't think Harper needs my help. She's doing just fine on her own. Margaret's eyes flicked between us, her expression unreadable. Well, I'm sure Harper appreciates the offer, she said, her voice like velvet over steel. I forced another smile, my patience wearing thin. Of course, collaboration is always welcome. As dessert was served, I excused myself to the bathroom, needing a moment to breathe. The email from earlier still weighed heavily on my mind, and the dinner had only added to the pressure. I splashed some cold water on my face, trying to clear my thoughts. When I returned, I caught the tail end of a conversation between Ethan and his parents. Robert, usually the silent observer, was speaking with unusual fervor. Ethan, we only want what's best for you. Family is important. Ethan nodded, his jaw set. I know, Dad. But Harper is my family too. The room went quiet, the air thick with unspoken words. Vanessa's eyes flicked to me, something like surprise crossing her features before she masked it with a smile. Well, family dinners are always interesting, aren't they? I took my seat, feeling the tension coil tighter. The night ended with polite goodbyes and promises to do this again soon, though I doubted anyone truly meant it. As we drove home, Ethan was unusually quiet, his fingers tapping a restless rhythm on the steering wheel. Harper, I'm sorry about tonight. They can be intense. I reached over, placing my hand over his. It's okay. I know they mean well in their own way. He sighed, glancing at me with a mixture of gratitude and frustration. I just wish they could see how amazing you are. How much you mean to me. I smiled, touched by his words. But the unease lingered, a shadow that refused to be dispelled. And as we pulled into our driveway, I knew that the family dinner had only scratched the surface of the turmoil to come. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of determination simmering beneath my skin. Last night's dinner had only confirmed what I already knew. Something had to give. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine while Vanessa was potentially stealing from Ethan. The email evidence was a ticking time bomb, and it was time to defuse it. After Ethan left for work, I sat at the kitchen table, the email open on my laptop. My heart pounded as I reread the transactions, each one a betrayal that cut deeper than the last. I knew I had to tell Ethan, no matter how much it hurt. When he returned home that evening, I was ready. We settled on the couch, and I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. Ethan, there's something we need to talk about, I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. He looked at me, concern etched on his face. "What's going on, Harper?" I handed him the laptop, the email displayed in stark black and white. "I got this a couple of days ago. It's about Vanessa." Ethan's eyes scanned the screen, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. This can't be right," he said, his voice tight with shock. "I know it's hard to believe," I replied gently, "but we need to figure out what's going on. I didn't want to keep it from you, but I had to be sure." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration and disbelief. Why would she do this? Vanessa's always been difficult, but this. "I don't know," I said, my heart aching for him. "But we need to confront her. We can't just let this slide." Ethan nodded, his resolve hardening. "You're right. We need answers." The next day, Ethan arranged to meet Vanessa at a cafe downtown. I insisted on coming along, needing to see the confrontation through. As we walked in, Vanessa was already there, sipping a latte with the practiced grace of someone who knew they were being watched. "Hey, you too," she greeted us, her smile bright but brittle. Ethan didn't waste time. "Vanessa, we need to talk about something serious." Her smile faltered, a flicker of unease crossing her face. "Okay, what's this about?" He placed the laptop on the table, the email open for her to see. "Can you explain this?" Vanessa's eyes widened as she took in the information, her expression shifting from surprise to indignation. "This is ridiculous. You think I'd steal from you, Ethan? Then how do you explain these transactions?" Ethan pressed, his voice a mixture of anger and hurt. She hesitated, and for a moment, I thought she might confess. But then her gaze hardened. "I don't know what this is, but it's not me. Someone's trying to set me up." Ethan's jaw clenched, his frustration palpable. "Vanessa, we need the truth." Her eyes flashed with defiance. "I swear, Ethan, I didn't do this. You have to believe me." The tension hung heavy between us, an invisible barrier that seemed impossible to cross. I glanced at Ethan, seeing the conflict etched in his features. He wanted to believe her, but the evidence was damning. Just as I thought the conversation was reaching a dead end, Vanessa let slip, "You really think Mom would let something like this happen?" Ethan froze, his eyes narrowing. "What does Mom have to do with this?" Vanessa's expression shifted, a flicker of panic crossing her face. "Nothing. I just mean she's always watching out for us." But the damage was done. Ethan's suspicion was piqued, and I could see the wheels turning in his mind. There was more to this than just Vanessa's actions, and now it seemed Margaret might be involved too. As we left the cafe, Ethan was silent, his thoughts a storm of confusion and betrayal. I reached for his hand, offering what comfort I could. "We'll figure this out, Ethan. Together." He nodded, his grip tightening on mine. "I just never thought it would come to this. My own family." I understood his pain, the sense of betrayal cutting deeper than any physical wound. But I also knew that uncovering the truth was the only way forward. As we walked back to the car, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much larger battle. And whatever secrets lay buried in the Calloway family, we would face them together. The days following our confrontation with Vanessa were tense, like living in a pressure cooker with the heat slowly rising. Ethan and I were navigating a minefield, and every step felt precarious. We knew we had to address the elephant in the room, Margaret's possible involvement, but the question was how. One evening, Ethan came home with a determined look in his eyes. "We need to talk to my parents," he said, his voice firm but weary. "Are you sure?" I asked, my own doubts gnawing at me. "What if it makes things worse?" He shook his head, resolute. "We can't keep avoiding it. If there's something more going on, we need to know." I nodded, understanding the necessity, even as my stomach twisted with anxiety. We agreed to visit them the next day, hoping for clarity but bracing for the fallout. The Calloway residence was as imposing as ever, its grandeur overshadowed by the tension that seemed to seep from its walls. Margaret greeted us with her usual poise, but there was an edge to her demeanor, as if she sensed the storm brewing. "To what do we owe this surprise visit?" she asked, her tone light but her eyes watchful. Ethan didn't waste time. "We need to talk about Vanessa and the money." Margaret's smile faltered, a flicker of something, fear, perhaps, crossing her face. "What about it?" Ethan took a deep breath, his grip on my hand reassuring. "We have evidence that Vanessa might have been siphoning money from my accounts. And she mentioned something about you when we confronted her." Margaret's expression hardened, her gaze shifting to me as if searching for weakness. "And you believe her? You think I'm involved in some scheme against my own son?" The accusation hung heavy in the air, and I could feel Ethan's struggle, caught between loyalty to his family and the truth staring him in the face. "We just want to understand what's going on," he said, his voice a mix of frustration and pleading. Robert, who had been silent until now, cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should all sit down and discuss this calmly." Margaret shot him a look, but he held her gaze, a silent communication passing between them. Reluctantly, she nodded, and we moved to the living room, the atmosphere tense and charged. As we settled into our seats, I noticed Margaret's fingers tapping a restless rhythm on the armrest, a small crack in her otherwise composed facade. "Vanessa has always been impulsive, but I assure you I have no knowledge of any financial misdeeds," she said, her voice steady but lacking conviction. Ethan leaned forward, his eyes searching hers. "Then why did she mention you? What aren't you telling us?" Margaret hesitated, a rare moment of vulnerability crossing her features before she masked it with resolve. "There are things you don't understand, Ethan. Family matters that are best left in the past." Her words were cryptic, a veil over whatever secrets lay beneath. But before Ethan could press further, Vanessa walked in, her expression a mixture of defiance and desperation. "I didn't do it," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I swear I didn't." Ethan turned to her, his frustration evident. "Then why all the secrecy? Why drag Mom into this?" Vanessa's eyes flicked to Margaret, a silent plea for help. But Margaret remained silent, her lips pressed into a thin line. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken truths, until Robert spoke up, his voice calm but firm. "Perhaps it's time we all stopped dancing around the issue. If there's something going on, it's better to address it now." Margaret's gaze softened, a rare glimpse of the woman behind the armor. "It's complicated, Ethan. There are things I've done to protect this family, to keep us together." Her admission hung in the air, a crack in the foundation that threatened to widen. I could see Ethan's resolve wavering, torn between anger and a desire to understand. I placed a hand on his arm, grounding him in the moment. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out. Together." The room was silent, the weight of the truth pressing down on us all. And in that moment, I realized that this was about more than just money or betrayal. It was about a family grappling with its own demons, and the lengths they would go to protect their own. As we left the house, I felt a shift in the air, a sense of inevitability that left me both anxious and strangely hopeful. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, it felt like we were moving towards something real, something honest. And whatever lay ahead, I knew we would face it together. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting soft shadows across the room. I lay awake, the weight of everything pressing down on me like a heavy blanket. The confrontation with Margaret had left more questions than answers. And the family's silence was a deafening reminder of the secrets that still lay hidden. Ethan was already up, pacing the kitchen with a cup of coffee in hand. His eyes were shadowed with fatigue, the strain of the past few days evident in every line of his face. "We need to do something," he said, breaking the silence. I nodded, though I wasn't sure what that something was. "Maybe we should talk to my dad," I suggested, thinking of Gregory's steady wisdom. "He might have some insight on how to handle this." Ethan agreed, and later that day, we found ourselves at my father's house. Gregory greeted us with his usual warmth, his presence a balm against the chaos. Over tea, we laid out the situation, from the financial discrepancies to the cryptic hints of family secrets. Gregory listened intently, his expression thoughtful. "It sounds like there's a lot more going on beneath the surface," he said, his voice calm and measured. "You need to approach this with care, but also with honesty. Secrets have a way of festering if left unchecked." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I just don't know how to get through to them. It's like they're all hiding something, and I'm stuck in the middle." Gregory nodded, a sympathetic smile on his lips. "Sometimes, the best way to deal with secrets is to bring them into the light. Confront them head on, but be prepared for what you might find." As we left, I felt a renewed sense of purpose, though the path ahead was still uncertain. We needed to confront the family to demand the truth, but it was a daunting prospect. Back at home, Ethan and I discussed our next steps, our conversation punctuated by tense silences. "We should get everyone together," Ethan suggested. "Lay everything out and see what happens." I hesitated, the thought of another confrontation filling me with dread. But Gregory's words echoed in my mind, urging me to face the truth. "Okay," I agreed. "But we need to be prepared for whatever comes out." The following weekend, we gathered the Calloway family at Ethan's parents' house. The air was thick with unspoken tension, everyone on edge as we settled into the living room. Ethan took a deep breath, his resolve unwavering. "We need to talk about what's been happening. About the money and whatever else is going on." Margaret's eyes narrowed, her defenses rising. "I told you, I don't know anything about this." Vanessa, seated beside her, looked equally defiant. "And I already said I didn't do it." Ethan's frustration boiled over, his voice rising. "Then why all the secrecy? Why can't we just be honest with each other?" The room fell silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on us all. It was Robert who finally broke the silence, his voice steady but grave. "There are things that have been kept from you, Ethan. Things that we thought were best left in the past." Ethan turned to him, confusion and hurt in his eyes. "What are you talking about, Dad?" Robert exchanged a glance with Margaret, a silent conversation passing between them. "Your mother and I have been dealing with some financial issues. We didn't want to burden you with it." Margaret's expression softened, a rare vulnerability showing through. "We thought we could handle it ourselves, but things got out of hand." Vanessa shifted uncomfortably, her bravado crumbling. "I tried to help, but it just made things worse." The revelation hung in the air, a tangled web of deceit and good intentions gone awry. Ethan's shoulders slumped, the weight of it all crashing down on him. "Why didn't you tell me? We could have worked through this together." Margaret's eyes glistened with unshed tears, her voice barely a whisper. "We didn't want to worry you. You have your own life, your own future to think about." Ethan looked at me, searching for support, and I nodded, my heart aching for him. "We're in this together," I said softly. "We'll figure it out." As the family began to talk, the tension slowly eased, replaced by a tentative hope. The road ahead was still fraught with challenges, but for the first time, it felt like we were moving in the right direction. And as we left the Calloway house that evening, I realized that justice wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about understanding, about finding a way to heal the wounds that had been hidden for too long. And with that understanding came a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to build a future free from the shadows of the past. The Calloway family meeting had left me emotionally drained, and as Ethan and I drove home, a heavy silence settled between us. The revelations about the financial troubles were just the tip of the iceberg, and I could feel the weight of it pressing down on us both. It was as if we were standing on the edge of a precipice, and one wrong move could send everything crashing down. Ethan's grip on the steering wheel was tight, his knuckles white with tension. "I can't believe they kept this from me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "All these years, and I never knew." I reached over, placing a comforting hand on his arm. "They thought they were protecting you," I offered, though the words felt hollow even to my ears. He shook his head, frustration etched into every line of his face. "But at what cost? We're supposed to be a family, Harper. Families don't keep secrets like this." I nodded, understanding his pain all too well. The Calloways were a family bound by secrets, and now those secrets were threatening to tear them apart. But as much as I wanted to help, I felt like an outsider looking in, powerless to stop the unraveling. Back at our apartment, Ethan paced the living room, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. "What are we supposed to do now?" he asked, his voice tinged with desperation. I hesitated, unsure of how to answer. "Maybe we need to give them time. Let them sort through their own issues." He stopped, turning to face me, his eyes searching mine. "And what about us? Where does this leave us?" The question hung in the air, heavy with uncertainty. I wanted to reassure him, to promise that everything would be okay, but the truth was, I didn't know. The path ahead was murky, and for the first time, I doubted whether we could find our way through it. As the days passed, the tension between us grew, a silent chasm that seemed impossible to bridge. Ethan threw himself into his work, spending long hours at the office, while I buried myself in my own projects, trying to distract myself from the gnawing sense of dread. One evening, as I was leaving the office, my phone buzzed with a new email. The subject line read, "Final warning." My heart skipped a beat, the ominous word sending a chill down my spine. I opened the email, my eyes scanning the text with growing horror. It was another anonymous message, warning me to stay out of Calloway family affairs. The words were threatening, a stark reminder of the forces at play behind the scenes. I felt a cold sweat break out across my skin, the fear settling deep in my bones. When I got home, Ethan was already there, his expression weary and defeated. "We need to talk," he said, his voice strained. I nodded, my heart heavy with the burden of the email. "I got another message," I admitted, handing him my phone. He read the email, his face darkening with anger. "This has to stop," he said, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. "I won't let them scare you away." "But what can we do?" I asked, my own frustration bubbling to the surface. "We're up against something bigger than us, Ethan." His eyes met mine, a flicker of determination breaking through the despair. "We fight back. We don't let them win." As much as I wanted to believe him, the odds felt insurmountable. The Calloway family was a fortress, and we were outsiders trying to break through the walls. But Ethan's resolve was infectious, and despite my doubts, I found myself nodding in agreement. "Okay," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "We'll do this together." The days that followed were a blur of strategy and planning, as we worked to uncover the truth and bring the family's secrets to light. But the threats continued, a constant reminder of the danger lurking in the shadows. And then, just when it seemed like we were making progress, the final blow came. A letter arrived at our apartment, unsigned but unmistakable in its intent. It was a demand for silence, a threat to expose my own family's vulnerabilities if we didn't back off. I felt the ground shift beneath me, the realization hitting me like a tidal wave. This wasn't just about the Calloways anymore. It was about my family too. The stakes had never been higher, and the path forward seemed more perilous than ever. As I stood there, the letter clutched in my trembling hands, I knew we were at a crossroads. The fight for justice had become personal, and the lines between right and wrong were blurring. But even in the face of uncertainty, one thing was clear. We couldn't back down now. Not when so much was at stake. The tension was palpable as Ethan and I arrived at the Calloway residence for what we hoped would be the final confrontation. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that made your skin prickle and your heart race. We had called this meeting, determined to finally bring everything into the open and lay the family's secrets bare. As we entered the living room, Vanessa was already there, her expression a mask of defiance. Margaret sat beside her, her posture rigid, while Robert stood by the window, his gaze distant and contemplative. The room felt like a powder keg, and we were the match ready to ignite it. Ethan took a deep breath, his resolve evident in the set of his shoulders. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steady but tinged with urgency. "We're here because we need to address the issues that have been tearing this family apart." Margaret's eyes narrowed, suspicion clouding her features. "And what issues would those be, Ethan?" Ethan exchanged a glance with me, and I nodded, encouraging him to continue. "The financial troubles, the secrets, the threats," he said, his words hanging in the air like a challenge. "We can't keep pretending everything's fine when it's not." Vanessa scoffed, her bravado barely concealing her anxiety. "I've already told you I had nothing to do with the money. And yet, here we are," Ethan replied, his gaze unwavering. "If it wasn't you, then who? And why all the secrecy?" Robert cleared his throat, drawing our attention. "There's more to this than you realize, Ethan. We've been trying to protect you, but perhaps it's time you knew the truth." The room went silent, the weight of his words pressing down on us all. Ethan's brow furrowed, confusion and determination warring within him. "What truth?" Margaret shifted, her facade cracking ever so slightly. "We've been dealing with some legal issues," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Things that could affect the entire family." Vanessa's eyes widened, genuine surprise flashing across her face. "What are you talking about, Mom?" Margaret hesitated, her gaze flicking to Robert for support. "It's complicated, but we've been under investigation for some financial discrepancies at the bank. We didn't want to drag you into it." Ethan's jaw tightened, the betrayal cutting deep. "And you thought keeping us in the dark was the solution?" Margaret's expression softened, regret mingling with her resolve. "We thought we could handle it. But things spiraled out of control." The revelation hit like a punch to the gut, the pieces of the puzzle finally falling into place. The siphoned funds, the threats, they were all part of a larger scheme, one that had ensnared the entire family. But before we could fully process the implications, Vanessa spoke up, her voice shaking. "I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know about any of this." Ethan turned to her, his anger tempered by a flicker of empathy. "Then why the secrecy? Why didn't you come to me?" Vanessa's bravado crumbled, vulnerability shining through. "I was scared, okay? I didn't want to lose you, Ethan. You're the only one who's ever really understood me." The admission hung in the air, a fragile truth that shifted the dynamics in the room. Ethan's expression softened, the anger giving way to understanding. "We're family, Vanessa. We should have faced this together." As the tension slowly eased, I felt a renewed sense of hope. The confrontation had brought long-buried secrets to light, and with them, the possibility of healing. But just as it seemed like we were reaching a resolution, Robert spoke again, his voice grave. "There's one more thing you should know. The investigation isn't just about the bank. It involves some questionable dealings that could impact your future, Ethan." Ethan's eyes widened, the implications crashing down on him. "What do you mean?" Robert sighed, the weight of his words heavy with regret. "There are business associates who might try to use this against you, to leverage your position. It's why we've been so cautious." The revelation was a final twist, a reminder that the fight wasn't over yet. But as I looked around the room, at the family finally united in purpose, I knew we would face it together. In that moment, I realized that justice wasn't about revenge or retribution. It was about truth, about bringing light to the shadows and finding a way forward. And as Ethan and I left the Calloway house, hand in hand, I knew we were ready to face whatever came next together. The weeks following our confrontation with the Calloway family were a whirlwind of change and reflection. The truth had been laid bare, and with it came the slow, tentative process of healing. Ethan and I found solace in each other, our bond strengthened by the trials we had faced together. One crisp autumn morning, Ethan and I sat on the porch of our apartment, sipping coffee and watching the leaves dance in the wind. The air was filled with a sense of renewal, a reminder that even after the harshest storms, life continues to grow. Ethan turned to me, a soft smile playing on his lips. "I've been thinking a lot about what's next for us," he said, his voice steady and hopeful. I nodded, feeling the warmth of his words seep into my bones. "Me too. It feels like we've come through the worst of it." He reached for my hand, his touch a comforting anchor. "I know things have been tough, but I'm grateful we faced it together. I don't know what I'd do without you, Harper." I squeezed his hand, my heart swelling with emotion. "We're stronger because of it. And I think your family is too." The Calloways had begun to mend their fractured relationships, slowly but surely. Vanessa had taken responsibility for her actions, acknowledging the damage her insecurities had caused. She was working to rebuild trust with Ethan, her sincerity a welcome change from the manipulative facade she once wore. Margaret, too, had softened, her protective instincts tempered by a newfound understanding. She had reached out to me, her apology heartfelt and genuine. It was a small step, but one that hinted at the possibility of reconciliation. As we sat in comfortable silence, the doorbell rang, breaking the tranquility of the morning. I rose to answer it, surprised to find a courier holding a small package addressed to me. Curious, I opened it to find a letter from Margaret, her handwriting neat and precise. Inside was a note, simple yet profound. "Harper, I owe you an apology, not just for the past few months, but for the way I've treated you since you entered our lives. I see now that my fears of losing Ethan blinded me to the wonderful person you are. Thank you for standing by him, and for helping us see the truth. With gratitude, Margaret." The words were a balm to old wounds, a gesture of peace that I hadn't expected but deeply appreciated. I felt a sense of closure, a weight lifting from my shoulders as I shared the letter with Ethan. He read it, his eyes shining with emotion. "I knew she'd come around eventually," he said, his voice filled with pride and relief. We spent the rest of the day reflecting on our journey, the challenges we'd faced, and the growth that had come from them. The themes of justice and protection had woven through our lives, guiding us to a place of understanding and acceptance. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Ethan turned to me, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Do you ever wonder what's next for us?" I smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle over me. "I think whatever it is, we'll face it together. And that's enough for me." His eyes met mine, a promise of the future we would build, free from the shadows of the past. "Together," he echoed, his voice a soft vow. And as we sat there, hand in hand, I realized that the journey was far from over. There would be new challenges, new revelations, and perhaps even new secrets to uncover. But whatever lay ahead, I knew we were ready to face it, armed with the lessons we'd learned and the strength we'd gained. The story of the Callaways was one of redemption and forgiveness, of finding light in the darkest of places. And as we looked to the future, I knew that our story was just beginning, a testament to the power of love, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds of family.
It was a typical Tuesday morning, the kind where everything felt routine and predictable. I had just finished my first cup of coffee and was about to head out to the dental clinic when I noticed a small package on the doorstep. It was wrapped in plain brown paper, no return address, just my name scrawled across the top in a hurried hand. The air felt suddenly tense, a chill creeping up my spine as I picked it up. "Hey, Lewis," I called out, trying to mask the unease in my voice. "Did you order something weird?" Lewis, my husband, appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He gave me a quizzical look, shaking his head. "Not that I remember. What is it?" I shrugged, tearing at the paper. Inside was a broken baby doll, its limbs twisted grotesquely, and a note that made my heart drop. "You'll never be a real mother." For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the note, my mind racing. It felt like a punch to the gut, a cruel reminder of the pressures that had been quietly building in our lives. Pressures from Elaine, my mother-in-law, who never missed a chance to remind me that time was ticking. "Kelly, what is it?" Lewis asked, his voice laced with concern as he stepped closer. I handed him the note without a word. His eyes widened, and I saw a mix of confusion and anger cross his face. Who would do this? I shook my head, trying to push back the rising tide of emotions. "I have no idea," I lied, though a part of me had a sinking suspicion. Elaine had been relentless lately, her subtle digs and not-so-subtle hints that it was time for grandchildren. She had always been traditional, the kind of woman who believed in family above all else, even if it meant bulldozing over other people's boundaries. But this was a new low. "Maybe it's just some sick joke," Lewis suggested, though his tone lacked conviction. "We should call the police." I could see he was torn, wanting to protect me, but also not wanting to believe his mother could be involved in something so malicious. I wanted to believe that too, but the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was growing fast. "Let's not jump to conclusions," I said, forcing a calm I didn't feel. "I'll just throw it away. It's probably nothing." He nodded, but I could tell he wasn't convinced either. We both knew this wasn't just nothing. It was a threat, a reminder of the battle I was fighting, both with Elaine and within myself. Later that day, as I worked on a patient, my mind kept drifting back to the package. I tried to focus on the rhythmic scraping of the dental tools, the familiar routine that usually grounded me. But today it was just noise, a backdrop to the chaos swirling in my head. During lunch, I sat alone in the break room, picking at my salad. My phone buzzed with a text from Lewis. "We need to talk tonight." Simple, but it carried the weight of unspoken worries. I couldn't help but think back to the last family dinner. Elaine's pointed questions about when we were planning to settle down. Each question felt like a jab, a reminder that in her eyes, my career was just a placeholder until real life began. As the day wore on, I tried to shake off the feeling that something had shifted. The package was a catalyst, pushing me to confront the uncomfortable truth that Elaine's expectations were suffocating me. And the worst part, I wasn't sure if Lewis was ready to stand up to her, or if he even wanted to. When I got home, Lewis was waiting, the package gone but its presence still looming over us. "We need to figure this out, Callie," he said, his voice steady but his eyes full of uncertainty. I nodded, feeling the weight of the decision we had to make. Yeah, we do. As we sat down to talk, I realized this was just the beginning. The package was more than just a cruel joke. It was a sign that things were about to get a lot more complicated. And as much as I wanted to run from it, I knew there was no escaping the storm that was coming. I just hoped we were strong enough to weather it together. That weekend, we found ourselves at Elaine's house for another one of her infamous family dinners. The air was thick with the smell of roasted chicken and something else, tension. I could feel it prickling at my skin as soon as we stepped through the door. Elaine greeted us with her usual smile, but there was a sharpness in her eyes that made my stomach churn. "Callie, Lewis," she chimed, pulling us into a quick embrace. "I'm so glad you could make it." "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. Lewis squeezed my hand, a silent reminder that we were in this together, even if it felt like we were walking into a lion's den. Dinner started off well enough, with the usual small talk and polite laughter. But it wasn't long before Elaine steered the conversation to her favorite topic, grandchildren. "You know, I ran into Mrs. Thompson the other day," Elaine began, her voice dripping with feigned innocence. "Her daughter just had twins. Can you imagine the joy?" Lewis shifted uncomfortably in his seat, and I could feel his silent plea for me to stay calm. "That's wonderful for them," I said, forcing a smile. Elaine's gaze locked onto mine, her smile never wavering. "It just makes me think about how lovely it would be to have little ones running around here." I felt the words like a slap, but I held my ground. "We're focusing on other things right now, Elaine." Her eyes narrowed just a fraction. "Of course, dear. But you know, time waits for no one." Lewis cleared his throat, trying to defuse the tension. "Mom, we've talked about this." Elaine raised her hands in mock surrender. "Oh, I'm just saying. You two would make such wonderful parents." The rest of the meal passed in a blur of forced conversation, my mind replaying her words over and over. Each one was like a needle, poking at the insecurities I tried so hard to bury. After dinner, as we helped clean up, Elaine cornered me in the kitchen. "Callie, dear," she said, her voice low and conspiratorial. "I just want what's best for you and Lewis." I paused, wiping a plate dry with more force than necessary. "I know you do, Elaine." She leaned in, her expression softening in a way that made me wary. "I just worry sometimes. You know, about you and your choices." There it was, the not-so-subtle dig. I met her gaze, refusing to back down. "Our choices are just that, ours." Elaine's smile tightened. "Of course. But I do hope you won't let your career come between you and family." I opened my mouth to respond, but Lewis appeared, sensing the brewing storm. "Everything okay in here?" "Perfect," I said, handing him the plate. "Just finishing up." As we drove home, the silence between us was heavy. I could feel Lewis's eyes on me, waiting for the inevitable. "Callie," he began, his voice tentative. "I know tonight was a lot." I nodded, staring out the window at the passing streetlights. "It's always a lot with her." "I'll talk to her," he promised, though we both knew it was a promise he'd made before. "I don't want you to feel pressured." I sighed, feeling the weight of the evening settle over me. "It's not just about pressure, Lewis. It's about respect." He reached for my hand, his grip reassuring. "I know, and I'm sorry. I want us to be okay." I squeezed his hand back, wishing it were that simple. "Me too." The next morning, as I prepared for work, I found a message from an unknown number on my phone. "Heard about the dinner. She'll never change." It was cryptic, unsettling. My thoughts immediately went to Elaine, but something told me this was different. A new player in a game I hadn't realized I was part of. I showed the message to Lewis, who frowned, his mind working through the implications. "Do you think it's her?" I shook my head, unsure. "I don't know, but it feels like someone else is involved." As I went through the motions at work, the message gnawed at me. It was a reminder that this wasn't just about family dinners and passive-aggressive comments. There was something deeper, a current of betrayal and secrets running beneath the surface. That night, I found myself on the porch, staring at the stars and wondering what was coming next. The cracks in our foundation were growing, and I wasn't sure how much longer we could hold everything together. But one thing was clear. I was done playing by Elaine's rules. It was time to find out who was really pulling the strings and why. I just hoped I was ready for what I might uncover. A few days after that unsettling message, I was at the clinic, trying to focus on work, when my phone buzzed with a text from a friend. It was a link to an online forum, one where people shared community gossip and complaints. My name was in the headline. I clicked the link, my heart pounding. The post was a long, rambling accusation about how I had supposedly mishandled a past pregnancy, leading to a miscarriage. The words were cruel, twisting the knife in a wound I had thought was long healed. The post was anonymous, but I had a sinking feeling about who was behind it. That night, I sat on the couch, staring at the screen, my hands shaking. Louis walked in, his face falling when he saw my expression. "Callie, what's wrong?" I handed him the phone, unable to speak. As he read, his face darkened, anger flashing in his eyes. This is insane. Who would do this? Who do you think?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He sat down beside me, a heavy sigh escaping his lips. "We need to talk to her." I nodded, though the thought of confronting Elaine filled me with dread. But I knew we couldn't ignore it any longer. It was time to face the storm head-on. The next day, we drove to Elaine's house. The tension in the car was palpable, each of us lost in our thoughts. When we arrived, Elaine greeted us with her usual warmth, but I could see the flicker of something else in her eyes. Come in," she said, ushering us into the living room. "To what do I owe this surprise visit?" Louis wasted no time, his voice firm. "Mom, we need to talk about something serious." Elaine's smile faltered, but she gestured for us to sit. "Of course, dear. What's on your mind?" I took a deep breath, meeting her gaze. "There's a rumor going around about me, about a miscarriage. It's vicious and false." Elaine blinked, her expression carefully neutral. "Oh, Callie, I'm so sorry to hear that. People can be so cruel." I could feel the anger rising, a hot tide threatening to spill over. "Elaine, this isn't just gossip. This is personal. And it feels like it's coming from someone who knows us." Her eyes widened, the picture of innocence. "Are you suggesting I had something to do with it?" Louis leaned forward, his voice steady but edged with steel. "Mom, we just want to get to the bottom of this. It's tearing us apart." Elaine's gaze flickered between us, a moment of hesitation before she spoke. "I would never do anything to hurt you, Louis. Or you, Callie." The denial hung in the air, heavy and unconvincing. I wanted to believe her, but the evidence was mounting, and my patience was wearing thin. As we left, my mind was a swirl of emotions. Elaine's words had been smooth, but there was something in the way she had avoided eye contact, the slight tremor in her voice. That left me unsettled. Later that evening, as I sat on the porch, trying to make sense of it all, Mr. Jennings, our neighbor, shuffled over. He had a knack for appearing at the most opportune times. "Evening, Callie," he said, settling into the chair beside me. "Heard about the trouble you're having." I nodded, grateful for his presence. "It's been a rough few days." He looked thoughtful, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "You know, sometimes the people we trust the most can surprise us. Not always in good ways." I glanced at him, the weight of his words sinking in. "You think there's more to this?" Mr. Jennings shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. "Just saying, keep your eyes open. You never know who might be watching your back." As he left, his words lingered, a whisper of doubt and possibility. I realized that Elaine might not be the only one with a stake in this twisted game. The unexpected twist was that I had allies I hadn't counted on, and enemies I hadn't seen coming. With this new perspective, the theme of justice and revenge took on a deeper meaning. It wasn't just about confronting Elaine anymore. It was about uncovering the truth, no matter where it led or who it implicated. I went to bed that night with a sense of determination. The path ahead was tangled with lies and betrayal, but I was ready to face it. Whatever it took, I would find the truth and reclaim my life from the shadows. The following week, life seemed to return to a semblance of normalcy, but the tension between Louis and me was palpable. We were both on edge, waiting for the next shoe to drop. It came during a quiet evening at home, when Louis received a phone call that changed everything. I watched as he answered, his face shifting from confusion to disbelief. "What do you mean, she's here?" he asked, his voice rising. He glanced at me, eyes wide with something between panic and anger. "I'll be right there." He hung up, running a hand through his hair. "Callie, it's Amber. She's at Mom's house." I blinked, trying to process this new twist. "Amber? What is she doing there?" "I don't know," he replied, grabbing his keys. "But we need to find out." The drive to Elaine's was silent, the air thick with unspoken questions. When we arrived, Elaine's door was ajar, and raised voices spilled out into the night. We stepped inside to find Amber standing in the living room, her expression a mix of determination and frustration. Elaine sat across from her, arms crossed, her face a mask of defiance. "What's going on?" Louis demanded, his voice cutting through the tension. Amber turned to us, relief washing over her features. "I came to talk to Elaine." I thought she should know how her actions are affecting you too. Elaine's eyes flashed, but she remained silent, her lips pressed into a thin line. Amber, you didn't have to do this, I said, touched by her unexpected support. She shook her head, her gaze steady. I couldn't just stand by. Elaine, you need to stop. This isn't fair to them. Elaine's silence was deafening, the weight of her stubbornness filling the room. But there was something else in her eyes, a flicker of vulnerability that made me pause. Mom, Louis said, stepping forward, his voice softer now. We just want to understand why. Elaine's facade cracked, her voice trembling slightly. I only wanted what's best for you, Louis. I thought maybe Amber could help you see reason. The implication hung heavy in the air, the suggestion that Louis should reconsider his choices, his marriage. It was a betrayal wrapped in concern, a twist that cut deeper than any rumor. Amber's expression hardened. Elaine, I'm engaged. I moved on, and so has Louis. You need to accept that. The room fell silent, the truth settling over us like a shroud. Elaine's meddling had reached a breaking point, and there was no turning back. I took a deep breath, the anger and hurt giving way to a newfound clarity. Elaine, we love each other. That's not going to change. But we need you to respect our choices. Elaine looked at Louis, her eyes pleading. I don't want you to make a mistake. Louis's voice was firm, but gentle. The only mistake would be losing Callie because of all this. The power dynamics shifted in that moment, the strength of our resolve standing against Elaine's fear of losing control. It was a turning point, a chance to redefine our boundaries. Amber nodded, her presence a reminder of the support we had, even from unexpected places. You too deserve to be happy. Don't let anyone take that away. As we left Elaine's house, the tension between Louis and me began to ease, replaced by a sense of solidarity. We were in this together, and we would face whatever came next as a team. In the car, Louis reached for my hand, his grip reassuring. I'm sorry for everything, Callie. I should have stood up to her sooner. I squeezed his hand, feeling a renewed sense of hope. We both could have done things differently. But we're here now, and that's what matters. The drive home felt lighter, the weight of uncertainty lifting as we embraced the path forward. The theme of revenge had transformed into one of protection, not just for ourselves, but for the life we were building together. As we pulled into our driveway, I realized that this was more than just a fight against Elaine's interference. It was a chance to redefine what family meant to us, to carve out a space where love and respect could thrive. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt ready to face it, knowing that whatever happened, we would face it together. The idea of adoption had been a lighthouse in the storm, a guiding hope that Louis and I clung to as we navigated the choppy waters of family drama. We had begun researching agencies, discussing what it would mean to bring a child into our lives on our own terms. It was a chance to redefine what family meant, away from Elaine's expectations and manipulations. But hope has a way of being tested. It was a quiet Saturday morning when the phone rang. I picked it up, expecting a telemarketer or a wrong number, but the voice on the other end was familiar, and not in a comforting way. Callie, it's Elaine. I tensed, bracing myself. What do you want, Elaine? She hesitated, a rare pause that usually preceded something unpleasant. I heard about the adoption plans. I just wanted to say, I don't think it's a good idea. I felt my temper flare, the frustration bubbling over. And why is that, Elaine? Her voice was cool, calculated. A child deserves a real family, not one that's incomplete. The words were a dagger, twisting in the wound. I took a deep breath, fighting to keep my voice steady. A real family is built on love and commitment, not on your outdated notions. Elaine's silence was a challenge, and I could almost hear the gears turning in her mind. Louis should reconsider, she finally said. Think about what's best for him. I hung up, my hand shaking. It was clear she wouldn't back down, not without a fight. And I was done playing by her rules. That evening, as Louis and I sat down to dinner, I recounted the conversation, my voice thick with emotion. She just won't stop, Louis. She wants to control everything. He listened, his brow furrowed in concern. We can't let her dictate our lives, Callie. We have to stand firm. I nodded, but the weight of the situation pressed heavily on me. But what if she finds a way to sabotage the adoption? What if she never accepts us? Louis reached across the table, taking my hand in his. Then we'll deal with it together. We can't let her fear control us. His words were a bomb, but the doubts lingered, gnawing at the edges of my resolve. I knew Elaine was capable of more than just words. She had already shown how far she was willing to go. The next day, as I was leaving for work, Mr. Jennings waved me over from his porch. "Morning, Callie," he said, his eyes sharp and knowing. "Heard you might be expanding the family." I smiled, though it felt fragile. "We're considering adoption." He nodded, a thoughtful look on his face. "Elaine's been talking, trying to stir the pot." I sighed, the frustration bubbling up again. "I figured as much. But we're not backing down." Mr. Jennings leaned forward, his voice low. "Just remember, Callie, sometimes the best revenge is living well. Don't let her steal your joy." His words stayed with me throughout the day, a reminder that Elaine's power was only as strong as we allowed it to be. But it was easier said than done when every move felt like it was being watched, judged. That evening, as I sat alone on the porch, a car pulled up. To my surprise, Amber stepped out, her expression determined. "Callie," she said, sitting beside me. "I heard what Elaine said. I just wanted to check on you." I smiled, grateful for her presence. "Thanks, Amber. It's been challenging." She nodded, her gaze steady. Elaine's not the only one who can play the game. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Amber hesitated, then leaned closer. "I might have some information that could help. Something Elaine wouldn't want getting out." It was a revelation, a twist that shifted the balance of power. I hadn't considered the possibility of having leverage against Elaine, but Amber's offer opened a door I hadn't dared to approach. As the evening wore on, we talked about possibilities, strategies, and what it would mean to take a stand. It was a turning point, a chance to reclaim control from Elaine's grasp. The theme of revenge had evolved once again, from passive endurance to active resistance. It was no longer about just surviving Elaine's interference, but about asserting our right to happiness and family on our terms. With Amber's help, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead was still fraught with challenges, but I was ready to face them, armed with the knowledge that we weren't alone in this fight. Whatever happened next, we would meet it head-on together. The family gathering was set for Saturday. Elaine had insisted on hosting, as she often did, under the guise of mending fences. But I knew better. This was her stage, and she was the director, determined to control the narrative. Lewis and I arrived early, the tension between us a silent undercurrent. We exchanged a glance, a mutual understanding that this could be the tipping point. We were armed with Amber's revelations, but the outcome was uncertain. Elaine welcomed us with her usual air of authority, her smile tight and her eyes appraising. "I'm glad you could make it," she said, her voice smooth but with an edge that set my nerves on edge. As the evening progressed, the room filled with family members, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. But beneath the surface, a storm brewed, waiting for the right moment to unleash. Dinner was a tense affair, conversations skirting around the elephant in the room. I could feel the weight of Elaine's gaze on me, a challenge unspoken but understood. Finally, as dessert was served, I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. "Elaine," I began, my voice steady but firm. "We need to talk about the rumors." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to us. Elaine's expression didn't falter, but I caught the flicker of something, fear perhaps, in her eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about, Callie." I held her gaze, refusing to back down. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. The lies about a miscarriage, the attempts to sabotage our adoption plans." A murmur rippled through the room, the tension crackling like static electricity. Lewis placed a reassuring hand on my back, his support a solid presence. Elaine's mask slipped, her voice rising in defense. "I only wanted what's best for my son, for this family. And spreading lies is your idea of what's best." I countered, my anger flaring. "You can't control us, Elaine. We're not your puppets." The room was charged with a mix of shock and disbelief. Elaine's carefully constructed facade was crumbling, her grip on the family slipping. Lewis stepped forward, his voice calm but resolute. "Mom, we love you, but this has to stop. Callie and I are building a life together, and we need you to respect that." Elaine's eyes filled with tears, her vulnerability exposed for the first time. "I just wanted to protect you, Lewis." "Protect me from what?" he asked gently. "From happiness?" The silence that followed was heavy, the truth settling over us all. For a moment, it seemed like we had reached a turning point. But then Elaine's sister, always the opportunist, spoke up. "Maybe Elaine's right," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "Maybe you should think twice about this adoption. It's a big step." The words were a gut punch, a reminder that Elaine wasn't alone in her campaign against us. The support I thought we had was crumbling, leaving us exposed and vulnerable. I felt the walls closing in, the weight of judgment and doubt pressing down on me. It was a moment of despair, the lowest point in this battle for autonomy and respect. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw Amber standing by the door, her expression one of determination and defiance. She stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Callie and Lewis deserve to be happy, and they deserve a family of their own," she said, her eyes locking onto Elaine's sister. "And anyone who can't see that is blind to what really matters." Her words were a lifeline, pulling me back from the brink of hopelessness. It was a reminder that we weren't alone, that there were allies willing to stand with us against the tide. The room shifted, the balance of power tilting in our favor. Elaine's sister fell silent, her attempt to undermine us thwarted. As the evening drew to a close, I felt a sense of resolve settle over me. The path ahead was still fraught with challenges, but we had faced the storm and emerged stronger for it. The theme of revenge had transformed once more, from a desire for retribution to a quest for justice and truth. It was no longer about defeating Elaine, but about reclaiming our lives and our future. As we left Elaine's house, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead was uncertain, but I knew that with Lewis and our newfound allies, we could face whatever came next together. The family gathering had been a turning point, but the real confrontation was yet to come. A week later, Elaine called another meeting at her house, claiming she wanted to discuss the future. I knew this was it, the moment where everything would come to a head. As Lewis and I arrived, the tension was palpable. The family was already gathered, their expressions a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Elaine stood at the center, her posture commanding, but there was a vulnerability in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice steady but lacking its usual authority. "I've called you here because there are things that need to be addressed." I exchanged a glance with Lewis, his eyes reflecting my own uncertainty. We had come prepared, but the unpredictability of the situation kept us on edge. Elaine turned to us, her gaze direct and unyielding. "Callie, Lewis, I've made mistakes. I see that now. But I can't just let things go without understanding why you're making such drastic decisions." The room was silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. I felt the familiar surge of frustration, but I knew this was a chance to finally lay everything bare. "Elaine," I said, stepping forward, my voice clear and unwavering. "Our decisions are our own. We want a family, but it has to be on our terms, not yours." She flinched but held her ground. "I just don't want you to regret anything. Family is everything, and I thought Amber could help you see that." Amber, who had been standing quietly to the side, stepped forward, her expression resolute. "Elaine, I can't be a part of this. Lewis and Callie have made their choice, and it's time you respected that." Elaine's eyes widened, the realization dawning that her last ally was slipping away. "Amber, No," Amber interrupted, her voice firm. "I won't be used as a pawn in this. I care about both of you, but this has to stop." The room was electric with tension, the air thick with the unspoken truths that had been simmering beneath the surface. Elaine's facade was crumbling, and in that moment, I saw not just the antagonist of my story, but a woman struggling against her own insecurities and fears. Lewis took my hand, his grip steadying. "Mom, we love you, but this isn't about you. It's about us and the life we're building together." Elaine's shoulders slumped, the fight leaving her eyes. "I just wanted to protect you," she whispered, her voice breaking. I stepped closer, my resolve softening. "We know, but your protection felt like control. We need to make our own mistakes, find our own way." The silence that followed was heavy, but it was a silence filled with possibility, a chance for healing and understanding. Then, unexpectedly, Mr. Jennings cleared his throat, drawing the room's attention. "Elaine, sometimes letting go is the greatest act of love. You've raised a good son. Trust him." His words cut through the tension, a reminder that love sometimes meant stepping back, allowing others to forge their own paths. Elaine nodded slowly, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I see that now. I'm sorry for everything." The apology hung in the air, a tentative bridge between past grievances and future reconciliation. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start. As the gathering broke up, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The confrontation had been cathartic, a chance to finally face the core themes of our journey: revenge, justice, and ultimately forgiveness. Elaine approached us, her expression tentative but sincere. "I hope you can forgive me. I still have a lot to learn." Lewis smiled, his arm around my waist. "We all do, Mom." As we left, hand in hand, I realized that the path ahead was still uncertain, but it was one we would navigate together, with the support of those who truly mattered. The climax had brought us face to face with the heart of our struggle, and while the road to healing would be long, it was one we were ready to embark on, together. The adoption process was a whirlwind of paperwork and anticipation, a journey that tested our patience and resolve. But finally, the day arrived when we welcomed a beautiful little girl into our lives. Holding her in my arms for the first time, I felt a surge of love and completeness that made every struggle worthwhile. Louis and I stood in our living room, surrounded by friends and family who had supported us through the storm. Amber was there, her presence a reminder of unexpected allies and the strength of friendship. Even Elaine had come, standing quietly at the edge of the room, her expression a mix of pride and humility. As we celebrated, I caught Elaine's eye across the room. She approached slowly, her steps tentative. "Callie," she began, her voice soft. "Thank you for letting me be here." I nodded, the past months of tension and conflict simmering beneath the surface. "I'm glad you came." Elaine glanced at the baby in my arms, her eyes softening. "She's beautiful. You're both going to be amazing parents." There was a sincerity in her words that hadn't been there before, a vulnerability that hinted at change. I felt a flicker of hope that perhaps this could be a new beginning for all of us. Later, as the guests began to leave, Elaine lingered, her expression contemplative. "Callie, I want to give you something," she said, handing me an envelope. Inside was a letter, the paper worn and the ink slightly smudged. I glanced at Elaine, a question in my eyes. "It's my story," she explained, her voice tinged with emotion. "I thought it might help you understand why I was the way I was." I nodded, touched by the gesture. "Thank you, Elaine." That night, after everyone had left and our daughter was asleep, Louis and I sat together, reading Elaine's letter. It was a heartfelt account of her own struggles with infertility, the pressure she had faced, and the fear of losing her family. The letter was a revelation, a glimpse into the pain and insecurity that had driven Elaine's actions. It didn't excuse her behavior, but it offered a new perspective, a chance to understand and perhaps forgive. As I folded the letter, I felt a sense of closure, a resolution to the conflict that had once seemed insurmountable. Elaine's journey was her own, but it had intersected with ours in ways that had shaped us all. In the days that followed, I returned to my dental practice, rediscovering my passion and purpose. The challenges of the past had strengthened my resolve, and I embraced my role as a mother with newfound confidence. Elaine's relationship with us remained a work in progress, but we had set boundaries, prioritizing our family's peace and happiness. It was a delicate balance, but one we were committed to maintaining. One afternoon, as I watched our daughter play in the garden, I felt a sense of contentment and gratitude. The journey had been tumultuous, but it had led us to this moment, a testament to resilience and the power of love. As Louis joined me, wrapping his arm around my shoulders, I reflected on the themes that had defined our path: revenge, justice, and ultimately, forgiveness. Our story wasn't just about overcoming adversity, but about finding strength in vulnerability and the courage to forge our own path. The resolution was not without its complexities. Elaine's letter had left lingering questions about the nature of forgiveness and the possibility of rebuilding bridges. But I realized that some answers might never be clear-cut, and that was okay. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over our home, I felt a sense of peace. Our journey was ongoing, but we faced it together, armed with the lessons of the past and the promise of the future. In the end, it wasn't just about finding justice or exacting revenge, but about healing and embracing the messy, beautiful reality of family. And in that, I found a resolution that was both satisfying and profound.
I never meant to find that email. If I had just minded my own business that afternoon in the graduate lab, maybe none of this would have happened. But there it was, glowing on the computer screen Gideon had forgotten to lock. Proof that my academic rival wasn't just beating me through hard work and natural talent. My name is Cal, and until that moment I thought I understood how the world worked. Work hard, play fair, earn your success. Simple rules that had gotten me through undergrad and into one of the most prestigious graduate programs in the country. But sometimes life has a way of showing you just how naive you really are. I stood there, frozen, reading the email exchange between Gideon and his mother for the third time. The words seemed to burn themselves into my retinas. "Don't worry about the scholarship committee, darling. Your father has already spoken to Dean Matthews. It's practically yours." My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and snapped a quick photo of the screen. Part of me felt dirty doing it, like I was no better than them. But I needed proof. I needed to know I wasn't crazy. Cal? What are you doing at my station? I nearly jumped out of my skin. Gideon stood in the doorway, his usual perfectly pressed shirt and confident smile suddenly seeming more sinister than charming. I fumbled for an excuse, my heart hammering. Looking for Professor Grant's latest dataset. Thought you might have it. Ah. His smile didn't waver, but something flickered in his eyes. Well, I'm afraid I don't. Perhaps you should check your email. The way he emphasized your made my stomach turn. Did he know I'd seen it? I forced myself to smile back, gathering my things with hands that felt clumsy and obvious. Right, good idea. Thanks. I was almost to the door when he spoke again. Oh, and Cal? Best of luck with the Hawthorne Fellowship application. May the best candidate win. I looked back at him, really looked at him for the first time. The golden boy of our department, son of Malcolm and Vivian Hawthorne, whose name just happened to be on the very fellowship we were both competing for. How had I never questioned it before? Yeah, I managed. May the best candidate win. Later that evening, I sat in my small apartment, staring at the photo on my phone while Tessa made dinner in our tiny kitchen. The smell of garlic and olive oil filled the air, but I couldn't focus on anything except those damning words. You've been quiet since you got home, Tessa said, placing a plate of pasta in front of me. Bad day at the lab? I looked up at her concerned face, wondering how much to share. Tessa had always been my rock, the voice of reason when I got too caught up in my own head. But this was different. This could change everything. I found something today. I started, then stopped. How do you tell someone that the system you both believed in is rigged? That all your hard work might mean nothing in the face of privilege and connection? Cal. She sat down across from me, her fork forgotten. What is it? I opened my mouth to tell her, but my phone buzzed with a new email. From Professor Grant. Subject line, urgent, fellowship committee meeting tomorrow. My stomach dropped as I opened it, scanning the contents quickly. The committee was moving up their decision timeline. By this time tomorrow, they would announce the recipient of the Hawthorne Fellowship. I looked at Tessa, then back at my phone with the damning evidence, and realized I had less than 24 hours to decide. Do I expose the truth and risk everything I've worked for, or do I stay quiet and let them win? Pasta grew cold as I sat there, wrestling with a decision that would change not just my future, but the lives of everyone involved. Sometimes karma needs a little push, right? Wrong or right, I had to make a choice. And fast. I barely slept that night, tossing and turning while Tessa's steady breathing beside me felt like a silent reproach. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I needed to talk to Professor Grant before the committee meeting. The early morning campus was quiet as I hurried across the frost-covered quad. Professor Grant's office lights were already on, a warm beacon in the gray dawn. I knocked, clutching my phone with the damning evidence. Come in, Cal. She looked up from her desk, reading glasses perched on her nose. I had a feeling you'd be here early. I closed the door behind me, my rehearsed speech dying on my lips as I noticed the tension in her expression. Professor, I need to show you something. Before you do, she interrupted, removing her glasses, sit down. There's something you should know about the Hawthorns. My stomach dropped as I sank into the chair. Professor Grant stood, moving to close the blinds before returning to her desk. Their influence runs deeper than you imagine, she said quietly. Malcolm Hawthorne doesn't just fund the fellowship. He funds half the research grants in this department. But if they're manipulating the committee, it's not that simple. She leaned forward. 20 years ago, I watched another brilliant student try to challenge them. She lost everything, her career, her reputation, her future in academia. The weight of her words hung in the air. Was it you? She smiled sadly. The point is, Cal, sometimes fighting isn't the answer. Sometimes we have to choose our battles wisely. My phone buzzed, a text from Tessa. Did you make a decision? Please talk to me before you do anything. Professor Grant watched me stare at the message. You haven't told Tessa everything, have you? She wouldn't understand. The words came out harsher than I intended. She thinks I'm obsessing over nothing, that I should just focus on our future together. And what future is that? Question caught me off guard. Tessa and I had plans, vague outlines of a life together after graduation. But suddenly they felt hollow against the weight of what was happening. I can't just let them win, I said finally. No one's asking you to. Professor Grant's voice softened. But there are different ways to fight, Cal. Ways that don't require sacrificing everything you've built. The committee meeting was in 2 hours. As if reading my thoughts, she added, whatever you decide, make sure it's worth the cost. I left her office more confused than when I'd entered. Crossing campus, I spotted Gideon talking to his mother near the science building. Vivian Hawthorne's elegant figure and perfectly coiffed hair seemed out of place among the rushing students. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in Gideon's shoulders as she spoke to him. My phone buzzed again. Tessa, meeting for coffee? Please. I watched Gideon's mother touch his arm in what looked like a gentle gesture, but I saw him flinch. Something about that small reaction made me pause. Was he as trapped as I was beginning to suspect? Fine, I texted Tessa back. Usual place in 10. She was already waiting when I arrived, 2 coffees on the table. You look terrible, she said, pushing one toward me. Thanks. I managed a weak smile. Cal, whatever you're planning. She reached for my hand. Just remember what's at stake. Not just for you, but for us. I pulled my hand back, the gesture automatic but immediately regrettable as hurt flashed across her face. What's that supposed to mean? It means I got a job offer. In Seattle. And I need to know if we're in this together or if you're too focused on fighting battles that aren't yours to fight. The words hit me like a physical blow. Seattle. A job offer. How long had she been sitting on this information? My phone buzzed one final time, an email notification about the committee meeting being moved up another hour. I looked at Tessa, saw the hope and fear warring in her eyes, and realized I was standing at a crossroads. The choice wasn't just about exposing the truth anymore. It was about what kind of person I wanted to be, and what I was willing to lose along the way. The fellowship announcement came exactly as I'd expected. Gideon won. What I hadn't expected was finding him in the empty lab that evening, hands shaking as he deleted files from his computer. Congratulations, I said from the doorway, watching him jump. Guess your parents must be proud. He didn't turn around. What do you want, Cal? The truth would be nice. I stepped into the lab, letting the door close behind me. Like why you're destroying evidence right now. His shoulders tensed, but he kept deleting. You don't understand what it's like. Having every choice made for you since birth. Having a legacy to uphold. You're right, I don't. I moved closer, noting the sweat on his neck. But I understand being trapped. Like you were this morning with your mother. That made him stop. You saw that. I saw enough. I pulled out my phone, pulled up the photo of his mother's email. Just like I saw this. He finally turned, his usual polished facade cracking. Delete that. Why? Afraid it might ruin your perfect family image? No, he said quietly. Afraid it might get my mother killed. The words hung in the air between us. Before I could process them, the lab door opened. Malcolm Hawthorne stood there, imposing in his tailored suit. Gideon, he said, his voice carrying that particular tone that wealthy men use when they're used to being obeyed. Your mother's waiting in the car. Father, Now. I watched Gideon's transformation, from a frightened man to the perfect son, happen in real time. It was like watching someone put on a mask. Of course. He gathered his things, avoiding my eyes. Good night, Cal. Malcolm stayed behind after Gideon left, studying me with cold calculation. You seem interested in my family, Mr. Rivers. Just in fairness, sir. Fairness. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Life isn't fair. I thought someone from your background would understand that. My phone felt heavy in my pocket. What's that supposed to mean? It means know your place. He stepped closer. My wife has certain health conditions. The stress of a scandal could be devastating. I trust you understand what I'm saying. The threat was clear, but something else nagged at me. The way Gideon had been deleting files, his father's careful words about his mother. Perfectly, I replied, matching his tone. Good. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and congratulate your girlfriend on the Seattle position. Prestigious firm, I hear. It would be a shame if something changed their mind about her. My blood ran cold. How did he know about Tessa's offer? After he left, I sat at Gideon's computer. Most files were gone, but he'd missed one, a folder labeled Medical Records. Inside was a single document, a psychiatric evaluation for Vivian Hawthorne dated 3 years ago. My phone buzzed. Tessa again. We need to talk about Seattle. Please come home. Another message followed immediately, this one from Professor Grant. My office, first thing tomorrow. Found something you need to see. I stared at the psychiatric report, thinking about Gideon's fear, his father's threats, and the way his mother had made him flinch. The story I thought I knew was shifting, revealing darker currents beneath. My phone buzzed one final time, an unknown number. Storage room B, basement level. 11 p.m. Come alone if you want the full story. Gee. I looked at the time, 10:45 p.m. Tessa was waiting at home. Professor Grant had answers. But something in Gideon's message felt desperate, urgent. Sometimes you have to choose between what's right and what's easy. Sometimes you have to risk everything to understand the truth. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the basement, sending Tessa a quick message. Something came up. Don't wait up. Her response was immediate. If you go down this road, Cal, I don't know if I can follow. I turned off my phone and took the stairs down into the darkness. Sometimes the only way forward is through the shadows, even if it costs you everything you thought you wanted. The basement storage room was dark except for a single fluorescent light flickering overhead. Gideon wasn't alone. Vivian Hawthorne sat perched on a metal filing cabinet, looking oddly elegant among the dusty boxes. I wondered if you'd come, she said, smoothing her silk blouse. Gideon insisted you would. Gideon stood in the corner, his usual confidence replaced by something that looked like resignation. Show him, Mother. She pulled out a manila envelope, her hands trembling slightly. Before you judge us, Mr. Rivers, perhaps you should understand what you're really fighting against. Inside were newspaper clippings from 20 years ago. As I read, my throat went dry. The Hawthorne family name splashed across headlines about a covered-up death, a psychiatric facility, and a young woman who disappeared after threatening to expose it all. Professor Grant, I whispered, the pieces clicking into place. Smart boy. Vivian's smile was brittle. She was brilliant like you. Thought she could change things. Malcolm made sure she couldn't. Mother, please. Gideon's voice cracked. He doesn't need to. He needs to understand. She snapped, then composed herself. My husband will destroy anyone who threatens this family. Even family itself. My phone buzzed in my pocket, probably Tessa wondering where I was. I ignored it. Why are you showing me this? Because, Vivian stood, suddenly looking every bit her age, I can't watch another bright future get crushed. Not even yours. The storage room door creaked open. Malcolm Hawthorne's shadow filled the doorway. Vivian, what have you done? Change in the room was instant. Vivian shrank back. Gideon stepped forward protectively, and I felt my hands curl into fists. It's over, Father, Gideon said. No more threats. No more control. Malcolm's laugh was cold. Control? I gave you everything. Both of you. He looked at his wife. Remember what happened last time you tried to be brave, dear? I watched Vivian flinch, saw Gideon's jaw clench, and something inside me snapped. I have copies, I lied, holding up my phone. Of everything. The emails, the medical records, these articles. One click and it all goes public. You're bluffing. But Malcolm's confidence wavered. Try me. I stepped forward. How much is your reputation worth, Mr. Hawthorne? Enough to let your son live his own life? To let your wife breathe? The silence stretched thin as a wire. Then Malcolm smiled and my blood ran cold. Interesting play, he said. But while we've been having this lovely chat, the Board of Trustees is reviewing some very concerning allegations about academic misconduct. Your misconduct, Mr. Rivers. My phone buzzed again, Professor Grant this time. Where are you? They're calling an emergency meeting. It's about you. You can't, I started. I already have. Malcolm straightened his tie. The question is, what are you willing to lose? Your career? Your girlfriend's future? All to play hero? Gideon moved suddenly, grabbing the envelope from my hands. No, father. Question is, what are you willing to lose? He pulled out a lighter, holding it to the papers. Malcolm's eyes widened. You wouldn't dare. Try me. Gideon's hand was steady now. I'm done being afraid. My phone buzzed one final time, Tessa. They're saying you cheated. That you stole research. Cal, what's happening? I looked at Gideon, at Vivian's hopeful expression, at Malcolm's carefully controlled rage. The truth about Professor Grant's disappearance, the years of manipulation and fear, it all came down to this moment. Sometimes justice isn't about winning. Sometimes it's about being willing to lose everything to do what's right. I deleted the photos from my phone. You win, Mr. Hawthorne. I'll resign tomorrow. Cal, no, Gideon protested. But I saw something shift in Malcolm's eyes, surprise, maybe even respect. Sometimes, I said, looking directly at him, the biggest power move is knowing when to walk away. I turned to leave, but Malcolm's voice stopped me. Perhaps we could find another solution. I didn't turn around. Perhaps we could. The game wasn't over. It was just changing rules. I found Tessa packing when I got home. Not just a weekend bag. Actual boxes lined our small apartment's walls. She didn't look up when I entered. The Seattle firm called, she said, taping another box shut. They heard about the academic misconduct allegations. Funny how fast news travels. My stomach twisted. Tessa, I can explain. Can you? She finally faced me, her eyes red. Because Professor Grant called too. She said you missed the emergency board meeting. Said you were with the Hawthorns instead. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. My phone buzzed, Gideon. Father's calling an emergency family meeting. Something's wrong. I need to talk. I'm trying to protect everyone, I said, the words sounding hollow even to me. Everyone except us. Tessa picked up a framed photo of us from last summer, then set it face down. I got another offer. A smaller firm in Seattle. Less prestigious, but they don't care about university politics. That's good, right? They need an answer by tomorrow morning. She met my eyes. I'm going, Cal. The question is, are you coming with me? Before I could answer, another text from Gideon. Mother's gone. Father's losing it. Please help. You're looking at your phone again, Tessa said quietly. They're pulling you right back in. It's not that simple. It is that simple. She threw the photo frame, glass shattering against the wall. Choose. Right now. Them or us. My phone kept buzzing. Gideon again, he's talking about Professor Grant. Says he'll fix the problem like last time. I have to go, I said, already backing toward the door. If you walk out right now, I won't be here when you get back. I froze, hand on the doorknob. 20 years ago, Professor Grant disappeared after threatening to expose the Hawthorns. Now she was back in their crosshairs because of me. I'm sorry, I whispered and left. The Hawthorne mansion loomed against the darkening sky. Gideon met me at the side entrance, looking pale. Father's in his study, he said. He's been making calls, talking about loose ends and permanent solutions. I think he's going to hurt her. Where's your mother? Left this afternoon. Said she couldn't watch history repeat itself. He ran a hand through his hair. Cal, I found something in his study while he was out, about what really happened to Professor Grant 20 years ago. Before he could continue, Malcolm's voice boomed from inside. Gideon! Get in here. We shared a look. I'll distract him, Gideon said. His safe behind the Rembrandt combination is Mother's birthday. Whatever you find, make it public. End this. He disappeared inside. I counted to 30, then followed, creeping toward the study. Malcolm's voice drifted through the half-open door. Your mother's always been weak, he was saying. But you, son, you're a Hawthorne. You understand what's necessary. And Professor Grant? Gideon's voice was steady. Is she necessary too? Some loose ends need tying up. Permanently. My phone vibrated. Tessa. Flight leaves at midnight. Please don't make me go alone. Through the door crack, I saw Malcolm open his laptop, typing something. Amazing how many accidents can happen to tenure-track professors, especially on empty campus roads late at night. My hand tightened on my phone. It's midnight. I could still make it. Could still choose a normal life with Tessa, far from all this. Then Malcolm said something that made my blood freeze. Same road where her sister had her accident 20 years ago. Poetic, really. Sister. Professor Grant had a sister who disappeared 20 years ago. Pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. I checked the time, 10:45 p.m. Professor Grant would be leaving her office soon, taking that same dark road home. I had just over an hour to choose, save my future with Tessa or save Professor Grant's life. My phone buzzed one final time. Professor Grant, whatever you're planning, stop. Some prices are too high to pay. She had no idea how right she was. Campus roads stretched empty and dark ahead of me as I gunned my ancient Honda toward Professor Grant's office. 11:15 p.m. The same road where her sister died 20 years ago. Where Malcolm planned to tie up loose ends tonight. My phone kept lighting up with messages I couldn't read while driving. Tessa. Gideon. Maybe even Malcolm, realizing I'd slipped away from his study. The midnight flight to Seattle felt like a dream from another life. Professor Grant's car sat alone in the faculty lot. Light still burned in her office window. I sprinted up the stairs, taking them two at a time, only to find her door locked. Professor! I pounded on the wood. You need to leave. Now. No answer. Through the frosted glass, I saw her office was empty. My phone buzzed. Gideon, father's gone. Can't find him. Be careful. The stairwell door creaked behind me. I spun around to find Professor Grant standing there, keys in hand. I wondered when you'd show up, she said quietly. You're just like Sarah was. Never could leave well enough alone. Your sister. The words felt heavy. She didn't have an accident, did she? Get inside. She unlocked her office, checking the hallway before closing the door. Malcolm called. Said you and Gideon found something in his safe. Evidence about your sister's death. He's planning to... I know what he's planning. She moved to her desk, pulling out a thick file. What he doesn't know is that I've been planning too. For 20 years. The file contained photos, documents, letters, a timeline of Malcolm's manipulation and violence stretching back decades. Why didn't you use this before? Because last time I tried, Sarah died. Her voice cracked. I couldn't save her. But maybe I can save you and Gideon. Headlights swept across the window. Car pulling into the lot. You need to leave, she said, pushing the file into my hands. Take the back stairs. I'm not leaving you here. Cal. She gripped my shoulders. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't fighting, it's knowing when to walk away. The office door burst open. Malcolm stood there, Gideon behind him with a split lip and wild eyes. I'm sorry, Gideon gasped. He made me tell him. Malcolm's laugh cut him off. Family loyalty. It's amazing what people will do to protect their own. He pulled out a gun. Though sometimes protection requires sacrifice. Father, don't, Gideon started forward. The gunshot was deafening in the small office. I felt the impact before I realized what happened, stumbling back against Professor Grant's desk. Warm wetness spread across my shirt. Cal. Gideon's voice seemed far away. Unfortunate, Malcolm said calmly. But necessary. Just like Sarah was necessary. Through blurring vision, I saw Professor Grant reach for something in her desk drawer. Malcolm turned the gun toward her. Not this time, Lila. My phone buzzed one final time. Tessa, boarding now. Please tell me you're on your way. The file slipped from my bloody fingers, papers scattering across the floor. 20 years of evidence, of waiting, of planning, all of it useless now. You see, Malcolm continued, the problem with justice is it's so messy. Better to keep things in the family. You're right, Gideon said suddenly. Family first. He moved with surprising speed, grabbing Malcolm's arm. The gun went off again, shattering the window. They struggled as Professor Grant lunged for her drawer. I tried to help, but my legs wouldn't work. The room tilted sideways as I slid to the floor. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. Hold on, Cal. Professor Grant's voice floated above me. Help is coming. But all I could think about was Tessa, probably taking her seat on that Seattle-bound plane right now, believing I'd chosen revenge over love. Maybe I had. Maybe that's why I was bleeding out on an office floor while Malcolm Hawthorne prepared to tie up his loose ends once and for all. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was Gideon's face, mouthing words I couldn't hear anymore. Then nothing but silence and shadows and the bitter taste of karma coming full circle. The hospital lights were too bright when I opened my eyes. Gideon sat beside my bed, his split lip now stitched, dark circles under his eyes. 3 days, he said before I could ask. Father's in custody. Mother's back. And Professor Grant. He paused. She wants to see you. My chest ached where the bullet had hit. Tessa. Gone. The Seattle flight left on schedule. The words hurt more than the wound. A nurse came in, checked my vitals, then left us alone again. There's something else, Gideon said, pulling out a worn leather journal. I found this in Father's safe. It's about why he really killed Sarah Grant. Before he could continue, Malcolm's lawyer appeared in the doorway. Mr. Rivers. A moment. Gideon stood protectively. He's not. It's okay, I managed. Let him in. The lawyer placed a document on my lap. Mr. Hawthorne is willing to make a deal. Full confession about Sarah Grant's death, in exchange for your silence about certain family matters. What matters? The real reason behind the Hawthorne Fellowship. He glanced at Gideon. And its true purpose. Gideon's face went pale. Father told you? He didn't have to. Professor Grant stood in the doorway, holding Malcolm's journal. I already knew. About Sarah. About the fellowship. About you, Gideon. The lawyer stepped forward. Professor Grant. Sarah wasn't just my sister, she continued, moving to my bedside. She was Malcolm's first wife. And Gideon's real mother. The silence that followed felt like another gunshot. That's impossible, Gideon whispered. The fellowship wasn't about academic excellence, Professor Grant said. It was about keeping the truth buried. Every year, Malcolm funded it to ensure his secret stayed safe. Sarah threatened to expose everything, so she had to die. The lawyer cleared his throat. These allegations are all documented. She held up the journal. Malcolm's own words. Every detail, every manipulation, every lie. Gideon grabbed the journal, flipping through pages frantically. His hands shook as he read. Mother, Vivian, she knew? She helped cover it up, Professor Grant said softly. To protect you. To protect the family name. My phone buzzed on the bedside table. A text from Tessa. Landed in Seattle. Hope you're alive to read this. The lawyer placed another document on my bed. Mr. Hawthorne anticipated this revelation. He's prepared to make restitution. A considerable sum. Get out. Gideon's voice was ice. Tell my father, tell Malcolm that his money can't fix this. After the lawyer left, Gideon sank into the chair, still clutching the journal. All these years. You were my aunt. You knew. I promised Sarah I'd watch over you, Professor Grant said. Even if I couldn't tell you the truth. My chest throbbed with each heartbeat. The night Sarah died. She was coming to tell you, wasn't she? Yes. Gideon's voice cracked. According to this, she left me a letter. Father, Malcolm, he hid it in the family vault. Professor Grant touched his shoulder gently. We can get it. Together. My phone buzzed again. Tessa, the firm's still willing to take both of us. If you want. Go, Professor Grant said, reading my expression. This isn't your fight anymore. But looking at Gideon, my former rival, now something closer to a brother in shared trauma, I knew she was wrong. Actually, I said, I think it is. I picked up my phone, typing, I'm sorry, Tessa, but I can't walk away. Not this time. Her response came quickly. I know. You never could. Be safe, Cal. Gideon looked up from the journal, tears in his eyes. What now? Now, Professor Grant said, we finish what Sarah started. We tell the truth. The truth. Such a simple word for something that had cost so much. But maybe that's what justice really is, not revenge, but the courage to face the truth, no matter the price. Together, I said, and saw hope flicker in Gideon's eyes for the first time since that night in his father's study. Sometimes family isn't what you're born into. Sometimes it's what you find when everything else falls apart. 6 months later, I stood in the campus courtyard, watching workers remove the Hawthorne name from the fellowship plaque. Beside me, Gideon clutched Sarah's letter, worn from countless readings. Strange, he said, seeing it come down. The media circus had finally died down. Malcolm's confession about Sarah's death made national headlines, but the real story, the one about family, truth, and the price of silence, that belonged to us alone. Professor Grant's office called, I said. Board approved her as the new department chair. Gideon smiled slightly. Mother would be proud. Both of them. Vivian had left for Europe after the truth came out, leaving behind her own letter for Gideon. Not an apology exactly, but an explanation. Sometimes love makes people do terrible things, thinking they're protecting those they care about. My phone buzzed, a Seattle area code. Tessa. I let it go to voicemail. You should talk to her, Gideon said. Some bridges can't be rebuilt. Maybe. He folded Sarah's letter carefully. Or maybe they just need a different foundation. We walked toward the science building where Professor Grant was waiting. The scholarship committee meeting would start soon, the first one without Malcolm's influence. You're still applying? I asked. Someone should. Gideon straightened his tie, a gesture so familiar it hurt. Might as well be the person whose mother inspired it. The renamed Sarah Grant Fellowship would support students studying ethics and science. A fitting legacy, though not the one Malcolm had intended. Professor Grant met us outside the conference room. Ready? Before Gideon could answer, a familiar figure appeared at the end of the hall. Tessa. I'll catch up, I said quickly. She looked different, more confident maybe. Seattle suited her. "Your voicemails," she said. "I got them all. I wasn't sure. I'm not staying." She cut me off gently. "But I needed to see you, to understand why you chose this over us." I glanced back at Gideon and Professor Grant, now deep in conversation. It wasn't about choosing sides. It was about choosing truth. And was it worth it? Question hung between us like smoke. Behind me, I heard the scholarship committee members arriving, their voices echoing in the hall. "I lost you," I said finally. "But I found something else. Something I didn't know I was looking for." She smiled sadly. "Family. Justice. And yeah, maybe family too." She reached out, squeezed my hand once. "Goodbye, Cal." I watched her walk away, feeling lighter somehow. When I joined the others in the conference room, Gideon gave me a questioning look. "I'm okay," I said and meant it. Professor Grant stood to address the committee but paused to hand me an envelope. Inside was a photo I'd never seen. Sarah and Lila Grant, young and smiling, standing in this very building. "She knew, Professor Grant said quietly, that someday someone would be brave enough to tell the truth. She just didn't know it would take two someones." The committee meeting began, but I barely heard it. I was thinking about karma, about how sometimes the universe's idea of justice looks nothing like revenge. Sometimes it looks like healing. My phone buzzed one final time, an email from Malcolm's lawyer. Another offer of settlement, probably. I deleted it without reading. Some debts can't be paid with money. Some truths are worth more than revenge. Ready to start over? Gideon whispered as Professor Grant announced the fellowship's new guidelines. I looked at the photo again, at Sarah's hopeful smile. At the future she died trying to protect. "Yeah," I said. "I think I am." Sighed, workers finished removing the last traces of the Hawthorne name. Tomorrow they'd install the new plaque. Life would go on. Stories would end and begin again. But some truths about family, about justice, about the choices we make in the name of love, those would stay with us forever. Not in bronze or stone, but in the deeper, more permanent material of who we'd become.
The day started like any other. I was buried under a mountain of paperwork at the law firm, trying to make sense of a particularly convoluted case, when my phone buzzed with a call that would change everything. "Harper, it's about your dad," the voice said, a mix of sympathy and urgency. My heart stopped, and I knew before they even said the words. He was gone. Just like that. "My name is Harper. I'm a paralegal, and I guess you could say my life just got flipped upside down. The news of my father's sudden death hit me like a freight train. He was my rock, the one person who always had my back, and now he was just gone. I felt like I was falling into a pit with no bottom. I barely remember leaving work or the drive home. Everything was a blur of tears and disbelief. As I walked through the door, Cole was already there, his eyes wide with concern. "Harper, what happened?" he asked, pulling me into a tight hug. His arms were warm and solid, the only thing keeping me from crumbling to the floor. "It's Dad," I whispered, the words barely audible. "He's gone." Cole held me tighter, whispering soothing words, but my mind was elsewhere, racing through memories and regrets. I should have called him more, visited more often. But it was too late for that now. The next few days were a whirlwind of arrangements and condolences. My father had left behind more than just memories. There was a mountain of debt I had no idea about. The savings I thought I had? Gone. Swallowed up by unpaid loans and medical bills. It was like losing him all over again. One night, as I sat alone in the dim light of our living room, sifting through his papers, I found a letter addressed to me in his handwriting. It was sealed, untouched, as if waiting for this very moment. My hands trembled as I opened it, revealing a few lines that hinted at a secret he never got the chance to share. There was no explanation, just a cryptic message about something he'd left for me, something important. I showed Cole the letter, hoping he could make sense of it. "What do you think it means?" I asked, feeling a mix of curiosity and dread. Cole studied the letter, his brow furrowed. "I don't know, Harper. Maybe it's something he wanted to tell you in person. His words offered little comfort. As much as I wanted to unravel the mystery, I had more immediate concerns. Our finances were in shambles, and I was struggling to keep it together. Cole, ever the pragmatist, suggested we get married sooner rather than later. "We can pool our resources, make things easier," he said, his tone gentle but firm. Marriage had always been on the cards, but this felt different, more like a necessity than a celebration. Still, the thought of having someone to lean on was a lifeline I desperately needed. So I agreed, clinging to the hope that together we could weather the storm. But beneath the surface, doubts lingered. Cole was supportive, no doubt, but there were times when I caught a flicker of something else in his eyes. Anxiety, perhaps, or maybe something deeper. He was under a lot of pressure at work, and I knew his mother, Vivian, wasn't exactly my biggest fan. She had always been polite, but there was an edge to her interactions with me, a subtle disapproval that I couldn't quite shake. I tried to brush it off, focusing instead on the future Cole and I were building. But the letter from my father nagged at me, a constant reminder that there were secrets yet to be uncovered. As I lay in bed one night, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't help but wonder if this was just the beginning of something bigger. The next morning, I woke with a sense of determination. Whatever my father had left behind, I would find it. And whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them head on. I had to for my sake, for Ivy's, and for the future I was determined to build. Yet, as I prepared to dive into the chaos of my new reality, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story than I knew. And that maybe, just maybe, the real storm was still on the horizon. Life after my father's funeral settled into a tense routine. Every morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach, a mix of grief and anxiety that seemed to grow heavier with each passing day. Cole and I were married now, but the financial strain was taking its toll. We were constantly juggling bills, and the stress was palpable. Cole was working late more often, his job at the tech company demanding more of his time and energy. I understood, of course. We needed the money, and he was doing his best to provide for us. But it left me feeling isolated, like I was carrying the weight of everything alone. Ivy, our daughter, was my only solace, her laughter a bright spot in an otherwise gloomy landscape. One evening, as I was tucking Ivy into bed, she looked up at me with those big, innocent eyes. "Mommy, why does Grandma say you're not a real mommy?" she asked, her voice small and confused. The question hit me like a punch to the gut. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Grandma says you don't know how to take care of me properly," Ivy replied, her little face scrunched up in concentration. I forced a smile. "Grandma loves you very much, Ivy. Sometimes grown-ups just say things they don't mean." But inside, I was seething. Vivian had always been critical, but undermining me to Ivy was a new low. I decided to confront Cole about it the next day. When he finally got home, exhausted and distracted, I brought it up. "Cole, we need to talk about your mother." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Harper, I really don't have the energy for this right now." "It's important," I insisted, trying to keep my frustration in check. "She's telling Ivy things that make me look bad." Cole's face tightened. "She's just concerned, Harper. She wants what's best for Ivy. And I don't." I shot back, my voice rising despite myself. "That's not what I meant," Cole said, a hint of irritation creeping into his tone. "Look, I'll talk to her, okay? But she's not the enemy here." I wanted to scream that maybe she was, but I bit my tongue. The last thing I needed was to push Cole further away. The tension between us grew thicker with each passing day. I could feel the distance widening, like a chasm opening up beneath our feet. One night, as I sat alone on the couch, I found myself staring at the mysterious letter from my father. It was a puzzle I couldn't solve, a secret that seemed just out of reach. Part of me wondered if it held the key to everything falling apart around me. The next morning, I decided to call Zoe, my best friend and confidant. If anyone could help me make sense of things, it was her. We met for coffee, and as I poured my heart out, she listened intently, her expression a mix of empathy and concern. "Harper, you can't let Vivian get to you," Zoe said, her voice firm but kind. "You're a great mom, and Ivy knows that. As for Cole, maybe it's time to have a serious talk about where you both stand." "I know," I replied, fiddling with my coffee cup. But it's like he's slipping away, and I don't know how to bring him back. Zoe reached across the table, squeezing my hand. You're stronger than you think. Just remember, you're not alone in this. Her words were a balm to my frayed nerves, but they didn't change the reality I faced. That evening, as I returned home, I found Cole in the living room, a tense look on his face. We need to talk, he said, gesturing for me to sit. I nodded, my heart pounding. What's going on? He hesitated, then finally spoke. My mother's been saying things because she's worried. She thinks we're not handling things well. And you agree with her? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. No, it's not that, Cole replied, frustration evident. But maybe she's right about one thing. We need help, Harper. Financially and maybe even emotionally. His admission was unexpected, a twist I hadn't seen coming. It was both a relief and a new source of anxiety. Accepting help meant admitting we couldn't handle things on our own, and I wasn't sure I was ready for that. But as I sat there, looking at the man I loved, I realized that maybe it was time to face the truth. Our marriage was fraying, and we needed to act before it unraveled completely. The question was, could we find our way back to each other, or had too much damage already been done? The tension in our house had reached a boiling point. It felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells, trying to avoid triggering another argument with Cole. But no matter how careful I was, the cracks in our marriage were widening, threatening to swallow us whole. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table, sorting through the endless pile of bills, I noticed Cole's laptop was still open. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but something about the way it was left there, screen glowing in the dim light, drew me in. I hesitated, then clicked on the email icon, a part of me knowing I shouldn't but unable to stop myself. What I found was a series of messages between Cole and his mother, Vivian. They were discussing our marriage, my abilities as a mother, and even the possibility of Cole moving back in with her, taking Ivy with him. My hands shook as I read through the emails, each word a dagger to my heart. Vivian was urging him to leave, painting me as unstable and unfit. And Cole, instead of defending me, seemed to be agreeing with her, his responses filled with doubt and uncertainty. I slammed the laptop shut, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The betrayal was suffocating. I felt like I was drowning, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find the surface. The man I had married, the man I thought I knew, was conspiring with his mother to tear our family apart. When Cole came home that night, I confronted him. I saw the emails, Cole, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. He froze, his eyes wide with shock. Harper, I can explain. Explain what? I interrupted, my voice rising. That you're planning to leave me? That you're letting your mother dictate our lives? It's not like that, he insisted, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I'm overwhelmed, Harper. I don't know what to do. Overwhelmed. I echoed, disbelief coloring my words. So your solution is to run away? To take Ivy from me? I just want what's best for her, Cole replied, his voice softening. And you think that's with Vivian? I asked, my voice breaking. Do you even realize what you're doing? He looked down, guilt and conflict warring on his face. I didn't mean for it to get this far. We stood there in silence, the weight of his betrayal hanging between us. I wanted to scream, to cry, but all I could do was stand there, numb and broken. The next day, I called Zoe, desperate for some semblance of clarity. We met at a small cafe, the noise of the bustling crowd a welcome distraction from the chaos in my mind. Harper, you need to think about what you want, Zoe said, her voice steady and reassuring. Not just for Ivy, but for yourself. I don't know, Zoe, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I feel like everything's slipping away. Zoe reached across the table, her eyes filled with determination. You're stronger than you think. Don't let them make you doubt that. Her words gave me a flicker of hope, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this fight. But as I left the cafe, my mind kept circling back to the emails, to the sense of betrayal that clung to me like a shadow. Back at home, I found Ivy playing quietly in her room, her innocence a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling around us. She looked up as I entered, her eyes bright with curiosity. Mommy, are you okay? she asked, her voice filled with concern far beyond her years. I forced a smile, kneeling down to her level. I'm okay, sweetheart. Just a little tired. She nodded, accepting my answer without question, and went back to her game. But as I watched her, I knew I had to protect her from the storm brewing between Cole and me. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized that something had to change. I couldn't keep living in this limbo, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I needed to take control, to stand up for myself and for Ivy. The next morning, I made a decision. I would confront Vivian, lay everything out on the table. It was a risk, but I had nothing left to lose. This was about justice, about reclaiming my life and my family from the brink of destruction. I had no idea what would happen, but I knew one thing for certain. I was done being a pawn in someone else's game. It was time to fight back, to find my own path forward, whatever that might look like. The morning light crept through the curtains, casting a soft glow over the room, but my mind was anything but peaceful. I was determined to confront Vivian, to finally put an end to her meddling. My heart raced with a mix of fear and resolve as I prepared for what I knew would be a difficult conversation. Ivy was at school and Cole was at work, leaving me with the perfect opportunity to visit Vivian without distractions. As I drove to her house, my grip on the steering wheel tightened, my knuckles white with tension. I rehearsed what I would say, knowing I had to stay calm, composed, and firm. Vivian greeted me at the door with a surprised smile, her eyes narrowing slightly as she realized I was alone. "Harper, what a surprise." "Come in," she said, stepping aside to let me pass. I entered, the familiar scent of her lavender candles filling the air. It was a beautiful home, filled with art and elegance, much like Vivian herself. But today, I wasn't here to admire her taste. "Vivian, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Of course. What's on your mind?" she replied, her tone pleasant but guarded. I took a deep breath, meeting her gaze head-on. "I know about the emails, Vivian. I know you've been encouraging Cole to leave me and take Ivy." Her expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something, perhaps annoyance or regret. "Harper, I'm only looking out for my son and granddaughter. I want what's best for them. And you think tearing our family apart is what's best?" I challenged, my voice rising slightly. Vivian sighed, a hint of exasperation in her eyes. "You're struggling, Harper. Anyone can see that. I'm just trying to ensure Ivy has the stability she needs. By undermining me?" I shot back, frustration bubbling to the surface. "By making Ivy question my love for her?" "She deserves the best," Vivian said, her voice firm but not unkind. "And I'm not convinced you can provide that right now." Her words stung, but I refused to back down. "I love Ivy more than anything, and I will do whatever it takes to protect her. That includes standing up to you." Vivian's eyes softened, and for a moment, I saw a glimpse of vulnerability. "I know you love her, Harper, but love isn't always enough." "Maybe not," I admitted, my voice quieter now. "But it's a start. And I'm not giving up on her or my marriage without a fight." The conversation ended there, a tense silence settling between us. As I left, I couldn't shake the feeling that Vivian's motives were more complicated than they seemed. Perhaps she truly believed she was acting in Ivy's best interest, but her methods were tearing us apart. Back at home, I found Cole waiting for me, his face a mask of concern. "I heard you went to see Mom," he said, his tone cautious. "I had to," I replied, meeting his gaze. "We can't keep going like this, Cole. Something has to change." He nodded, a weary sigh escaping his lips. "I know. I don't know how to fix this." "Maybe we need help," I suggested, the words feeling both foreign and necessary. "Counseling or something. For Ivy's sake, if nothing else." Cole hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Okay. If it means finding a way through this mess, I'm willing to try." It was a small step, but it felt like progress. Yet as the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was brewing beneath the surface. A sense of unease lingered, as if the ground beneath us was shifting, ready to give way at any moment. Then, one evening, as I was sorting through my father's old papers, I stumbled upon something unexpected, a bank statement in his name, showing a significant amount of money deposited just weeks before his death. It didn't make sense. Where had this money come from, And why hadn't he told me about it? The discovery sent my mind racing, the implications both thrilling and terrifying. Could this be the secret he hinted at in his letter? If so, it changed everything. But it also raised new questions, ones I wasn't sure I was ready to face. As I sat there, the statement clutched in my trembling hands, I realized that this could be the turning point I needed. A chance to reclaim control, to protect Ivy and myself from the chaos threatening to consume us. But it also meant confronting the past and whatever truths lay hidden within it. The stakes were higher than ever, and the path forward was uncertain. But one thing was clear, I couldn't turn back now. The fight for my family, for my future, had only just begun. The house was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that felt heavy and foreboding. I stood in the living room, staring at the bank statement I'd found among my father's papers. It was a lifeline, a potential solution to our financial chaos, but it also raised more questions than it answered. Where had this money come from, and why had my father kept it a secret? As I pondered these questions, the front door creaked open, and Cole walked in, his face drawn and tired. We hadn't spoken much since my confrontation with Vivian, both of us tiptoeing around the growing chasm in our relationship. "Harper, we need to talk," he said, breaking the silence. I nodded, bracing myself for whatever was coming. "What's on your mind?" He hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "I've been thinking. Maybe it's time we took a break. For Ivy's sake." The words hung in the air, a chilling echo of my worst fears. "A break," I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "Things have been tense, and I don't want Ivy caught in the middle," Cole explained, his tone both apologetic and firm. "So, you think leaving is the answer?" I asked, struggling to keep my emotions in check. "I think we need space to figure things out," he replied, avoiding my gaze. The betrayal cut deep, but anger quickly replaced the hurt. "And where does your mother fit into all this?" I challenged, my voice rising. "Is she the one pushing you to leave?" Cole's eyes flashed with frustration. "This isn't about her, Harper. It's about us." "Is it?" I shot back, unable to hide my bitterness. "Because it feels like she's been pulling the strings all along." He opened his mouth to respond, but then closed it, the silence between us louder than any argument. I turned away, my heart pounding with a mix of rage and despair. Later that night, I called Zoe, desperate for guidance. Her voice was a lifeline, grounding me in the midst of the storm. "Harper, you have to decide what's best for you and Ivy," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "Don't let anyone else make that decision for you." "I know," I replied, my voice shaky. "But it's so hard to see clearly when everything's falling apart." "Take it one step at a time," Zoe advised. "And remember, you're stronger than you think." Her words offered some comfort, but as I hung up, the reality of my situation loomed large. I was on the brink of losing everything I'd fought for, and the thought was terrifying. The next day, I decided to dig deeper into my father's affairs. I needed answers, not just for my sake, but for Ivy's future. As I sifted through more papers, I stumbled upon a letter addressed to a law firm. It was dated just days before his death, and it mentioned a trust fund, a potential game-changer if it was real. Armed with this new information, I made an appointment with the firm, hoping they could shed light on the mystery. The lawyer I met with was a kind, middle-aged man who seemed genuinely sympathetic to my plight. "Your father set up this trust fund years ago," he explained, showing me the documents. "It was meant for your future, Harper. He wanted to ensure you were taken care of." The revelation was overwhelming, a bittersweet reminder of my father's love and foresight. But it also meant I had a decision to make, one that could change everything. As I drove home, my mind raced with possibilities. The trust fund could provide the stability I needed, a way to start fresh without the weight of financial burdens. But it also meant stepping away from the life I'd built with Cole, a prospect that was both liberating and terrifying. When I arrived home, Cole was waiting for me, a look of resignation on his face. "I heard from the lawyer," he said, his voice subdued. "About the trust fund." I nodded, unsure of what to say. "So what now?" he asked, his eyes searching mine for answers. "I don't know yet," I admitted, my heart heavy with uncertainty. "But I need time to figure it out." He nodded, accepting my words without protest. It was a moment of clarity, a realization that we were both standing at a crossroads, unsure of which path to take. As I lay in bed that night, I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't keep living in limbo, torn between the past and the future. It was time to make a choice, to decide what justice and revenge truly meant to me. And whatever that choice was, it had to be for Ivy and me, not for anyone else. The air was thick with tension as I prepared to face Vivian again. This time, it wasn't just about Ivy or Cole. It was about reclaiming my life from the chaos that had consumed it. I knew this confrontation would be different, more intense, and I wasn't sure I was ready for what might come. When I arrived at Vivian's house, she opened the door with an expression that was equal parts surprise and resignation. "Harper, I wasn't expecting you," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "I need to talk to you," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. We sat in her living room, the air between us crackling with unspoken tension. "I know about the trust fund," I began, watching her reaction carefully. Vivian's eyes widened slightly, but she quickly masked her surprise. "And what does that have to do with me?" "It changes everything," I said, leaning forward. "I can finally stand on my own, without relying on Cole or you." She nodded, a flicker of something, perhaps respect or regret, in her eyes. "So, what do you want from me?" "I want you to stop interfering," I replied, my voice firm. "Let me and Cole figure things out on our own." Vivian sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "I never meant to hurt you, Harper. I just wanted to protect my family. By tearing us apart?" I challenged, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "I thought I was helping," she admitted, her voice softening. "I didn't realize how much damage I was doing." Her admission took me by surprise, but it wasn't enough to erase the pain of her actions. "It's time to let go, Vivian. Let Cole make his own choices." She nodded slowly, a hint of vulnerability in her eyes. "I'll try, Harper. I promise." As I left, I felt a sense of relief, but it was quickly overshadowed by the enormity of what lay ahead. The trust fund offered a way out, but it also meant making a choice I wasn't sure I was ready for. Back at home, I found Cole waiting for me, his expression a mix of hope and uncertainty. "How did it go?" he asked, his voice tentative. "She's agreed to back off," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "That's good, right?" he said, searching my face for reassurance. "It's a start," I conceded, though the path ahead felt anything but clear. As the days passed, I threw myself into work, trying to find solace in the routine. But the weight of the decision I had to make hung over me like a dark cloud, impossible to ignore. One evening, as I was leaving the office, my phone buzzed with a message from Zoe. "We need to talk. It's important," it read, sending a shiver of apprehension down my spine. We met at our usual cafe, and I could tell from her expression that something was wrong. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's about Cole," Zoe said, her eyes filled with concern. "I heard he's been talking to a lawyer about custody." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, leaving me breathless with shock. "Custody?" I echoed, my mind racing. "I didn't want to believe it, but I thought you should know," Zoe explained, her voice filled with regret. The betrayal was staggering, a blow I hadn't seen coming. I felt the ground shift beneath me, the fragile stability I'd clung to crumbling away. That night, I confronted Cole, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and anger. "Is it true?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "Are you planning to take Ivy?" He hesitated, guilt written all over his face. "I was just exploring options," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Options?" I repeated, incredulous. "You were going to take her away from me?" "I didn't know what else to do," he said, his eyes pleading for understanding. The room spun around me, the enormity of his betrayal crashing over me like a tidal wave. "I trusted you, Cole," I said, my voice breaking. "How could you do this?" "I'm sorry, Harper," he replied, his voice filled with remorse. "I didn't mean for it to get this far." But the damage was done, and as I stood there, I realized that the life I'd fought so hard to hold on to was slipping through my fingers. In that moment, I knew I had to make a choice, not just for Ivy, but for myself. The trust fund was my way out, a chance to start fresh without the weight of betrayal dragging me down. As I lay in bed that night, The tears finally came, a torrent of grief and anger that left me feeling hollow and spent. But beneath it all, a spark of determination flickered to life, a reminder that I wasn't beaten yet. I would fight for Ivy, for our future, and for the chance to reclaim my life from the ashes of what had been. It wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face whatever came next. The air was thick with anticipation as I prepared for what felt like the final battle in a long, exhausting war. The trust fund had given me the means to stand on my own, but the real challenge lay ahead, confronting Cole and deciding the future of our family. The stakes had never been higher, and I knew this was my moment to reclaim control. I arrived at the house, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. Ivy was staying with Zoe for the weekend, giving us the space we needed to have an honest conversation without distractions. As I stepped inside, I found Cole in the living room, his expression a mix of apprehension and resignation. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He nodded, gesturing for me to sit. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," he began, his voice heavy with emotion. "I have too," I replied, meeting his gaze. "And I've made a decision." He tensed, clearly bracing himself for the worst. "What is it?" "I'm going to use the trust fund to start fresh," I said, my words carefully measured. "I need to do this for Ivy and for myself." Cole's face fell, the weight of my decision settling over him like a shroud. "So this is it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "It doesn't have to be," I replied, my tone softening. "But things need to change, Cole. We can't keep living like this." He nodded, a flicker of something, hope perhaps, in his eyes. "I know. I've been thinking about that too." As we talked, the tension slowly began to ease, replaced by a sense of clarity. But just as I started to think we might find a way forward, Cole's phone buzzed with a message. He glanced at it, and his expression shifted from hope to dread. "What is it?" I asked, my heart sinking. "It's my mother," he said, his voice tight. "She wants to meet. Now." I felt a surge of frustration, but I knew this was an opportunity one couldn't pass up. "Let's go," I said, determination fueling my words. We drove in silence to Vivian's house, the air between us charged with unspoken tension. When we arrived, she was waiting for us, her expression unreadable. "Thank you for coming," Vivian said, her voice unusually subdued. "We need to talk," Cole said, his tone firm but respectful. "All of us." Vivian nodded, gesturing for us to sit. "I know I've made mistakes," she began, her voice thick with emotion. "I thought I was doing what was best, but I see now that I was wrong." "Vivian, we can't keep doing this," I said, my voice steady but firm. "We need to find a way to move forward for Ivy's sake." She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I just want what's best for her. I always have." "I know," I replied, my voice softening. "But we need to do this together." As we talked, the air between us slowly began to clear, the weight of past grievances lifting. It wasn't easy, but it was a start. Then, as if on cue, the unexpected twist arrived. Vivian reached for a small box on the table, handing it to me with trembling hands. "Your father gave this to me before he died," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He wanted you to have it." I opened the box, revealing a delicate necklace with a locket. Inside was a picture of my father, smiling warmly, and a note that simply read, "For my brave Harper." The gesture was overwhelming, a reminder of the love and support I'd always had, even when I felt alone. It was a symbol of the strength I needed to carry forward, to build a life for Ivy and me that was grounded in love and resilience. As I looked up, I saw a flicker of understanding in Cole's eyes, a realization that perhaps we could find a way to coexist, if not as partners, then as co-parents. "I'm sorry, Harper," he said, his voice filled with genuine remorse. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "I know," I replied, my voice steady with newfound strength. "But we have to do better for Ivy." The conversation continued, the three of us working through the tangled web of emotions and misunderstandings that had brought us to this point. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start, a chance to rebuild, to find peace in the chaos. As I left Vivian's house, the locket resting against my heart, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't experienced in months. The path ahead was still uncertain, but I knew I had the strength to face whatever came next. I was ready to embrace the future, to create a life defined by love, resilience, and hope. The sun was setting as I walked through the park, the sky a canvas of oranges and pinks. Ivy was playing nearby, her laughter echoing through the cool evening air. Watching her, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. It was a new beginning, one I'd fought hard to reach. The past few months had been a whirlwind of change. After the confrontation with Vivian, Cole and I had come to an understanding. We were no longer partners in marriage, but we were committed to being the best co-parents possible for Ivy. It wasn't easy, but it was a start. I'd moved into a cozy apartment, the trust fund providing the stability I needed to rebuild my life. With Zoe's encouragement, I'd started writing, pouring my experiences into words that resonated with others. It was cathartic, a way to process everything I'd been through and find my voice. One afternoon, as I sat at my desk, a knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. It was Miles, a friend I'd met through Zoe. He was kind, thoughtful, and had been a source of quiet support as I navigated my new reality. "Hey," he said, a warm smile on his face. "I brought coffee." I returned his smile, grateful for his presence. "Thanks, I could use a break." We sat together, the conversation flowing easily. Miles had a way of making me feel at ease, his calm demeanor a balm to my frayed nerves. As we talked, I realized how much I valued his friendship and perhaps the possibility of something more. "Have you thought about what's next?" Miles asked, his tone gentle. I nodded, a sense of clarity settling over me. "I want to keep writing, to share my story and help others who might be going through something similar." "That sounds perfect for you," he said, his eyes filled with encouragement. "You've got a gift, Harper." His words warmed my heart, a reminder of how far I'd come. I was no longer defined by the chaos of my past, but by the strength I'd found within myself. Later, as I watched Ivy play, Cole joined me, a tentative smile on his face. "She looks happy," he said, nodding towards our daughter. "She is," I replied, feeling a sense of pride. "We did that." He nodded, a hint of regret in his eyes. "I'm sorry for everything, Harper. I wish I could change the past." "I know," I said softly, meeting his gaze, "but we can't. We can only do better moving forward." It was a moment of understanding, a silent agreement to focus on what mattered most, our daughter and her happiness. As we stood there, I realized that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant letting go, freeing myself from the weight of past betrayals. As the evening drew to a close, I felt a sense of closure. The journey had been painful, but it had also been transformative. I'd discovered my strength, my resilience, and my capacity for love, not just for others, but for myself. Yet, as I reflected on everything, a lingering question remained. What would the future hold? It was a mystery, one I was ready to embrace with open arms. Life was unpredictable, but I learned that I could face whatever came my way. As Ivy ran towards me, her face alight with joy, I scooped her up, her laughter a melody that filled my heart. In that moment, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be, surrounded by love, hope, and the promise of new beginnings. Miles walked over, joining us with a smile that spoke volumes. It was a new chapter, one I was excited to explore. Together, we watched the sunset, a symbol of endings and beginnings, of the journey that had brought us here. The path ahead was uncertain, but I was no longer afraid. I'd found my footing, my voice, and my peace. And as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, I knew that whatever happened next, I was ready. Ready to live, to love, and to embrace the beauty of the unknown.
You know how they say life can change in an instant? Well, that's exactly what happened to me. One minute, I was basking in the glow of a perfect proposal, and the next, I was being asked to consider a living arrangement that felt like a step back into the 1950s. Let me back up a bit. My name is Marin, and up until that moment, I thought I had it all figured out. I'm 34, an occupational therapist, and fiercely independent. I've always prided myself on being able to balance my career and my personal life. But then Ethan, my charming and sometimes frustratingly loyal fiancé, threw a curveball I didn't see coming. We were sitting in our favorite little cafe, the kind with mismatched chairs and the smell of fresh coffee that hits you the moment you walk in. Ethan was fiddling with his cappuccino cup, a sure sign he was about to drop something big. I could tell he was nervous, but I didn't expect what came next. "Marin," he started, his voice a little too casual, "I've been thinking maybe we should consider moving in with my mom after we get married." I almost choked on my scone. "Move in with Lillian?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Lillian, his mother, was a force of nature. A retired school principal with a penchant for control, she was the kind of person who could make a simple dinner feel like a board meeting. "Just for a while," Ethan continued, not meeting my eyes. "She's been lonely since Dad passed, and it would give us a chance to save up for a bigger place." I could feel my heart racing. This was not part of the plan. I had always imagined us building our life together, not living under the watchful eye of his mother. But I also knew how much family meant to Ethan. His sense of duty was one of the things I loved about him, but it was also something that could drive me up the wall. I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "Ethan, I get that you want to be there for your mom, but living with her? Don't you think that's a bit much?" He finally looked at me, his eyes pleading. "She's been through a lot, Marin. And it wouldn't be forever. Just until she's back on her feet." There it was, the conflict that had been simmering beneath the surface. Ethan's loyalty to his family versus my need for independence. I could feel the tension building, like a storm about to break. "Okay," I said slowly, "how about a compromise? We could find a place nearby. That way we're close enough to help but still have our own space." Ethan nodded, relief washing over his face. "Yeah, that could work. I'll talk to her about it." Despite the uneasy truce, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Lillian wasn't the type to let go easily, and I had a sinking suspicion that moving nearby wouldn't be enough to keep her at bay. As we left the cafe, I noticed Ethan's phone buzzing on the table. It was a text from Lillian. I didn't mean to look, but the words jumped out at me. "Make sure she understands what's at stake." I felt a chill run down my spine. What exactly did she mean by that? It was an unsettling thought, and one I couldn't ignore. Back at home, I tried to push the conversation with Ethan to the back of my mind, but it lingered like a shadow. I busied myself with work, hoping that diving into my patient's progress reports would distract me. But every time I glanced at the clock, I was reminded of the ticking time bomb that was our living arrangement. Later that night, as I lay in bed next to Ethan, I couldn't help but wonder what else Lillian might have up her sleeve. Was this just about loneliness, or was there something deeper at play? I had a feeling I was about to find out. And that's how it all began. A simple suggestion that spiraled into something much more complicated. I knew I had to keep my wits about me because in this family drama, nothing was as it seemed. As I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the tip of the iceberg. The next few weeks felt like navigating a minefield. Ethan and I found a small apartment close to Lillian's house, a compromise that seemed to appease everyone on the surface. But beneath the polite smiles and forced pleasantries, tension simmered. Started with Lillian's frequent visits. She had a knack for showing up unannounced, always with some excuse. "I was just in the neighborhood," she'd say, holding a casserole dish like a peace offering. But there was always something else, an opinion on our furniture arrangement, a comment on my choice of career. Her words, though wrapped in sweetness, carried a sting. One evening, we had Lillian over for dinner. I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, when she wandered in, her eyes scanning the room like she was taking inventory. "So, Marin," she began, her voice casual, "are you still working those long hours? Must be tough balancing that with home life." I could feel the muscles in my jaw tighten. "I manage," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "I love what I do, and Ethan's really supportive." Lillian raised an eyebrow, a small smile playing on her lips. "Of course, but family is important too. Sometimes sacrifices have to be made." It was a dig, subtle but sharp. I turned back to the cutting board, focusing on the rhythm of the knife. Absolutely, but I think Ethan and I have found a good balance. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of small talk and forced laughter. Ethan seemed oblivious to the undercurrents, completely charmed by his mother's presence. I watched him, wondering if he noticed how his mother's eyes lingered on me, assessing, calculating. After Lillian left, I sank into the couch, exhaustion washing over me. Ethan joined me, his arm draping over my shoulders. "That went well, didn't it?" he asked, a hopeful note in his voice. "Sure," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Your mom's something else." He chuckled, missing the edge in my words. "Yeah, she can be a bit much, but she means well. She's just worried about us." I nodded, not trusting myself to say more. I didn't want to start a fight, not when I was still trying to figure out how to navigate this new dynamic. But the next day, things took a turn. At work, I received a call from the pharmacy about a prescription I didn't remember refilling. Confused, I assured them it must have been a mistake. But as I hung up, unease settled in my stomach. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. That evening, I mentioned it to Ethan. "Did you pick up a prescription for me?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He looked puzzled. "No, why?" I shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "Just got a weird call from the pharmacy. Probably nothing." But it didn't feel like nothing. It felt like a thread unraveling, one I needed to follow. A few days later, I found myself at Lillian's house, dropping off some groceries she'd requested. As I put the bags on her kitchen counter, a small stack of papers caught my eye. Among them, a note scribbled in Lillian's unmistakable handwriting. "Refill Marin's prescription." My heart skipped a beat. Why would she have a note about my medication? I felt a chill creep up my spine, a sense of violation that made my skin crawl. I didn't confront her then, not yet. I needed more information, more proof. But as I left her house, I couldn't shake the feeling that Lillian's meddling went deeper than I'd realized. Back at home, I tried to act normal, but my mind was racing. I couldn't tell Ethan, not without evidence. He'd never believe his mother capable of something so underhanded. Instead, I called Tessa, my best friend and confidant. As soon as she picked up, I blurted out everything. "Tess, I think Lillian's messing with my meds." "Are you serious?" she exclaimed, her voice a mix of disbelief and anger. "That's insane, Marin. You need to be careful." "I know," I said, my voice shaky. "But I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm losing control." Tessa was silent for a moment, then she spoke, her voice firm. "You need to find out what she's up to, and be ready for whatever comes next." As I hung up, I realized Tessa was right. This wasn't just about Lillian's fear of losing Ethan. It was about control, and I had a feeling things were about to get a lot more complicated. I had spent the better part of the week trying to piece together the puzzle Lillian had laid out, but every time I thought I had a handle on it, something else slipped through my fingers. The tension was palpable, like a storm about to break, and I could feel my patience wearing thin. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I came home to find Lillian sitting in our living room. Her presence was like a cold draft, uninvited and unsettling. Ethan was in the kitchen, oblivious to the unease that her visits always brought. "Hello, Marin," Lillian said, her voice smooth as silk. "I hope you don't mind. I thought I'd surprise you both with dinner." I forced a smile, though my jaw felt tight. "Of course not, Lillian. It's always nice to have company." She nodded, her eyes glinting with something I couldn't quite place. "I was just telling Ethan how proud I am of him. He's been working so hard." I glanced at Ethan, who was busy stirring a pot on the stove. "He has," I agreed, trying to keep my voice neutral. Lillian leaned back in her chair, her gaze fixed on me. "And you, Marin? How's work treating you? It must be hard, balancing everything." I shrugged, unwilling to give her more ammunition. "It's busy, but I manage." She tilted her head, a small smile playing on her lips. "You know, sometimes I wonder if you're taking on too much. It's important to focus on what truly matters." There it was again, that subtle jab. I could feel my pulse quicken, but I swallowed my retort. This wasn't the time or place for a confrontation, not with Ethan right there. As we sat down to dinner, I noticed Lillian's eyes flicking between Ethan and me, as if she were gauging the distance between us. I tried to ignore it, focusing instead on the food, but it was hard to shake the feeling that she was orchestrating something. Halfway through the meal, Lillian casually mentioned, "Oh, by the way, I spoke to Dr. Harris the other day. He mentioned your last checkup went well." I froze, my fork hovering midair. Dr. Harris was my doctor, but I hadn't told anyone about my recent visit. "How did that come up?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Lillian waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, you know how small towns are. Everyone knows everyone." He was just being friendly. I forced a laugh, though my mind was racing. How did she know about my checkup? And why was she talking to my doctor? After dinner, as Lillian prepared to leave, she turned to me, her expression softening. "You know, Marin, I only want what's best for you both. Sometimes, sacrifices have to be made for the greater good." I nodded, though her words felt like a veiled threat. "I understand, Lillian. Thanks for dinner." Once she was gone, I turned to Ethan, who was clearing the table. "Did you know your mom was talking to Dr. Harris?" He shook his head, looking genuinely puzzled. "No, why?" I hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. "It's just strange, that's all. I didn't think they knew each other." Ethan shrugged, dismissing it as small-town gossip. "She probably ran into him at the store or something. You know how she is." I nodded, though unease gnawed at me. I needed to get to the bottom of this, and soon. The next day, I decided to drop by Dr. Harris's office. As I sat in the waiting room, my mind spun with possibilities. Was Lillian meddling in my health? And if so, why? When Dr. Harris finally called me in, I wasted no time. "Doctor, I know this might sound odd, but has Lillian Hawthorne been in contact with you about me?" He looked surprised, then nodded slowly. "She did mention you. Said she was worried about your stress levels and wanted to make sure you were taking care of yourself." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Did she ask about my medications?" Dr. Harris hesitated, then nodded again. "She mentioned something about ensuring you were on the right track." I assumed she was just being a concerned family member. I thanked him, though my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. Lillian was more deeply involved than I'd realized, and her interference wasn't just about Ethan. It was about control, and I was caught in her web. As I left the office, I knew I couldn't keep this from Ethan any longer. I needed to confront him, to make him see what was happening. But as I walked home, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning, and that the storm was far from over. The air in our apartment was thick with unspoken words. I knew I couldn't avoid it any longer. The evidence was mounting, and Lillian's interference had crossed a line I couldn't ignore. I had to talk to Ethan. He was sitting at the dining table, absorbed in his laptop. I took a deep breath, steadying myself for the conversation that was about to unfold. "Ethan, we need to talk," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. He looked up, a hint of concern in his eyes. "What's up?" I sat down across from him, trying to gather my thoughts. "It's about your mom. I think she's been interfering with my health." Ethan's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "I found out she's been talking to my doctor, asking about my medications, and there have been some discrepancies in my prescriptions." He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Marin, that sounds a bit extreme. Are you sure?" I nodded, frustration bubbling beneath my calm exterior. "I spoke to Dr. Harris. He confirmed it. She's been meddling, Ethan." Ethan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'm sure she was just worried. Maybe she overstepped, but she wouldn't do anything to hurt you." His words stung, a sharp reminder of where his loyalties lay. "This isn't just about being worried, Ethan. It's about control. She's trying to manipulate our lives. He shook his head, disbelief etched on his face. I don't know, Marin. She's my mom. She wouldn't. I cut him off, my voice rising. Wouldn't she? You've seen how she tries to insert herself into every decision we make. This is just another way for her to keep us under her thumb. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but then closed it, his expression conflicted. I could see the struggle in his eyes, the tug of war between his love for me and his loyalty to his mother. I stood up, pacing the room to release some of the tension coiling inside me. I need you to see this, Ethan. I need you to understand what she's doing. He remained silent, his gaze fixed on the table. The silence stretched between us, heavy and oppressive. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. What do you want me to do? I stopped pacing, turning to face him. I want you to talk to her. Set boundaries. Make her understand that this is our life, not hers to control. He nodded slowly, though his expression was still troubled. Okay. I'll talk to her. But his words didn't fill me with confidence. I knew how deep Lillian's hold was on him, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this conversation wouldn't be the last. Later that night, as I lay in bed, my mind refused to quiet down. I couldn't stop replaying the day's events, the confrontation with Ethan, the look of doubt in his eyes. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, unsure of what lay below. The next morning, I decided to take matters into my own hands. If Ethan couldn't see the truth, I needed to find someone who could. Someone who knew Lillian's tactics better than anyone else. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Hello? Oliver? It's Marin. I need your help. There was a pause, then Oliver's voice, cautious but curious. Marin? What's going on? I explained everything, from the proposal to Lillian's interference. As I spoke, I could hear Oliver's sharp intake of breath, the disbelief turning to understanding. Sounds like she hasn't changed, he said, his voice tinged with bitterness. She did the same to me, you know. Tried to control every aspect of my life until I had enough. I felt a sense of relief, knowing I wasn't alone in this. I don't know what to do, Oliver. I love Ethan, but I can't live like this. Oliver sighed, a sound filled with empathy. You need to protect yourself, Marin. Whatever that means for you. Don't let her dictate your life. His words resonated with me, a reminder that I had the power to change my situation. As I hung up, I felt a renewed sense of determination. I wouldn't let Lillian's manipulations define my future. But as I prepared to face whatever came next, I couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was just beginning. And this time, I wouldn't back down. The days following my conversation with Oliver felt like a blur. I was on edge, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Ethan had promised to talk to Lillian, but I could sense his hesitation. Tension between us was a constant undercurrent, an unspoken rift growing wider with each passing day. One evening, Ethan came home later than usual, his expression weary. I was in the kitchen, attempting to distract myself with dinner preparations. The aroma of garlic and herbs filled the air, but it did little to soothe my nerves. Hey, he said, dropping his bag by the door. Sorry I'm late. Work was a mess. I nodded, trying to keep my tone light. No worries. Dinner's almost ready. He wandered over, peering into the pot. Smells great. I'm starving. We fell into a comfortable silence, the clinking of dishes the only sound between us. But I could feel the weight of the conversation we weren't having pressing down on me. Finally, I couldn't stand it any longer. Did you talk to your mom? Ethan stiffened, his shoulders tensing. I did. She didn't take it well, Marin. I stopped stirring, turning to face him. What did she say? He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. She got defensive. Said she was just trying to help and that you misunderstood her intentions. I let out a frustrated sigh. Ethan, this isn't just about intentions. It's about boundaries. She's crossing them. He met my gaze, his eyes filled with conflict. I know, but she's my mom. She's always been like this. I thought maybe she'd change, but... His voice trailed off, and I could see the struggle etched on his face. It was a familiar dance, one I'd seen too many times before. His loyalty to Lillian was a powerful force, one that often blinded him to the truth. I just need you to be on my side, I said softly, my voice tinged with desperation. He reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. I am Marin. I promise I'll talk to her again. But his words felt hollow, a promise without substance. I could feel the ground shifting beneath me, the precarious balance of our relationship tipping toward a breaking point. The next day, I decided to take a walk, hoping the fresh air would clear my head. As I strolled through the park, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, a storm gathering on the horizon. My phone buzzed in my pocket, jolting me from my thoughts. It was a message from Tessa. Can we meet? I need to talk. I texted back, arranging to meet her at our favorite cafe. When I arrived, Tessa was already there, her expression serious. What's up? I asked, sliding into the seat across from her. She hesitated, then leaned forward, her voice low. I heard something, Marin. About Lillian. My heart skipped a beat. What is it? Tessa glanced around, ensuring no one was listening. A friend of mine works at the pharmacy. She overheard Lillian asking about your prescriptions again. It sounds like she's trying to change them. The news hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt a rush of anger, mingled with fear. Why would she do that? Tessa shook her head, her eyes filled with concern. I don't know, but it's not right. You need to be careful. I nodded, though my mind was racing. Lillian's interference was becoming more brazen, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to confront her to make her understand that her actions were unacceptable. That evening, I returned home, my resolve hardened. Ethan was in the living room, flipping through channels on the TV. I took a deep breath, preparing for the confrontation ahead. We need to go see your mom, I said, my voice steady. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face. Now? Yes, now. I can't keep living like this, Ethan. I need to talk to her. He hesitated, then nodded, sensing the urgency in my voice. Okay. Let's go. The drive to Lillian's house was silent, tension crackling between us. When we arrived, I squared my shoulders, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Lillian answered the door, her expression a mix of surprise and curiosity. Marin Ethan. What a surprise. I met her gaze, refusing to back down. We need to talk, Lillian. About the prescriptions. Her eyes widened, a flash of something, guilt perhaps, crossing her face. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do, I pressed, my voice unwavering. I know you've been interfering and it needs to stop. Ethan stood beside me, silent but supportive. I could feel his presence, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this. Lillian's expression hardened, her facade slipping. I was only trying to help, Marin. You're making a mistake. No, Lillian, I replied, my voice firm. The mistake would be letting you continue to control our lives. As the words hung between us, I knew this was a turning point. It was time to take back control, to protect my future from Lillian's grasp. And this time I wouldn't falter. The days after confronting Lillian were a haze of tension and uncertainty. I had hoped that facing her head-on would bring some clarity, but instead it left me feeling more adrift than ever. Ethan's promise to talk to her again hung in the air, unfulfilled and weighing heavily on my mind. One evening, as I sorted through the mail, a letter caught my eye. It was addressed to Ethan, but the return address was Lillian's. Curiosity got the better of me, and I hesitated for a moment before deciding to open it. What I found inside made my heart sink. The letter was a detailed list of expenses, all marked as reimbursements. But what struck me most was the amount, thousands of dollars funneled to Lillian over the past few months. My mind raced with questions. Why hadn't Ethan mentioned this? What else was he hiding? I confronted Ethan as soon as he walked through the door. Ethan, we need to talk. Now. He looked taken aback by the urgency in my voice. What's going on? I handed him the letter, watching his expression shift from confusion to guilt. What is this, Ethan? Why are you giving your mom all this money? He ran a hand through his hair, his face a mask of frustration. It's not what it looks like, Marin. She needed help with some bills, and I didn't want to worry you. I felt a wave of anger and betrayal wash over me. You didn't want to worry me? Then we're supposed to be a team. How could you keep this from me? He opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off, my voice rising. This isn't just about the money. It's about trust. How can I trust you when you keep secrets like this? Ethan's shoulders slumped, his expression one of defeat. I'm sorry, Marin. I didn't know how to tell you. I thought I could handle it. I turned away, trying to process the whirlwind of emotions crashing over me. The man I loved, the man I thought I knew, had been keeping secrets that threatened to unravel everything we'd built. As I stood there, grappling with the weight of his betrayal, my phone buzzed with a message from Oliver. We need to talk. It's urgent. I didn't hesitate. I needed answers, and Oliver was the only one who could help me make sense of this mess. I left Ethan standing in the living room, his apologies ringing hollow in my ears. Meeting Oliver at a quiet cafe, I felt a sense of dread settle over me. He greeted me with a nod, his expression serious. I'm glad you came. There's something you need to know. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. What is it? Oliver sighed, his gaze steady. I've been looking into some things. Lillian's been using Ethan's money to pay off debts she's racked up over the years. She's been hiding it from him, manipulating him to keep him in the dark. The revelation hit me like a freight train. So she's been lying to him too? Oliver nodded. She's always been like this, Marin. She has a way of twisting things to keep people under her control. I felt a chill run down my spine, the enormity of Lillian's deception sinking in. I don't know what to do, Oliver. I feel like I'm losing everything. He reached across the table, his hand resting on mine. You're not alone in this, but you need to protect yourself. You can't let her pull you down with her. As I left the cafe, Oliver's words echoed in my mind. I knew he was right, but the path ahead felt impossibly daunting. My relationship with Ethan was crumbling, and the future I'd envisioned seemed to slip further out of reach with each passing day. Returning home, I found Ethan sitting on the couch, his head in his hands. He looked up as I entered, his eyes filled with regret. Marin, I'm sorry. I should have been honest with you. I nodded, though the hurt still lingered. I know, Ethan. But things need to change. We can't keep living like this. He nodded, his voice barely a whisper. I'll talk to her. I promise. But as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was too late. The damage had been done, and I was left questioning everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and trust. The road ahead was uncertain, and I had no idea how to navigate it. But one thing was clear. I couldn't continue down this path without losing myself in the process. And that was a price I wasn't willing to pay. The decision to leave Ethan had been building like a storm, inevitable and unstoppable. But the moment I finally made up my mind, the reality of it hit me with a force I hadn't anticipated. I was about to dismantle the life we'd built together, brick by brick, and there was no turning back. I packed my things quietly, the sound of zippers and rustling clothes echoing in the silence of our apartment. Each item I placed in my suitcase felt like a piece of my heart being torn away, but I knew I had to do it. For my own sake. Ethan came home as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room. He paused in the doorway, taking in the sight of my suitcase, and I saw the realization dawn in his eyes. Marin, what's going on? He asked, his voice laced with disbelief. I straightened, meeting his gaze with a resolve I hadn't known I possessed. I'm leaving, Ethan. I can't do this anymore. He took a step forward, his expression a mix of confusion and desperation. Leaving? Why? We can fix this. I shook my head, the words spilling out in a torrent. We can't fix what's broken, Ethan. Your mother's control, the secrets, the lies, it's too much. I need to protect myself. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away, the distance between us a chasm that couldn't be bridged. Marin, please. I'll talk to her. I'll make it right. I wanted to believe him, but I knew better. You've said that before, Ethan. And nothing's changed. I can't keep waiting for things to get better. The silence stretched between us, heavy and fraught with unspoken words. I could see the struggle in his eyes, the conflict between his loyalty to his mother and his love for me. As I turned to leave, the door swung open and Lillian stood there, her presence as commanding as ever. "What's all this?" she demanded, her gaze sweeping over the scene. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. "I'm leaving, Lillian. I can't be a part of this family anymore." Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of something, perhaps fear, crossing her face. "You're making a mistake, Marin. You're throwing away everything." I met her gaze head-on, refusing to back down. "No, Lillian. The mistake would be staying and letting you control my life." Ethan moved to stand between us, his voice pleading. "Mom, please." "Not now." But Lillian wasn't finished. "You think you can just walk away? You'll regret this, Marin. You're nothing without this family." Her words stung, but they also fueled a fire within me. I squared my shoulders, my voice steady. "I'm more than this, Lillian. I deserve better." Tension in the room was palpable, a living thing that pulsed between us. I could feel Ethan's eyes on me, searching for something, anything that might change my mind. But I was resolute. As I turned to go, Oliver appeared in the doorway, his presence a surprising comfort. He stepped forward, his gaze fixed on Lillian. "Enough, Mom. Let her go." Lillian's eyes widened, a mix of shock and betrayal. "Oliver, you have no right." "I have every right," he interrupted, his voice firm. "I've watched you manipulate and control for too long. It's time for it to stop." The room fell silent, the weight of Oliver's words hanging in the air. I felt a surge of gratitude toward him for standing up to her when I needed it most. With one last glance at Ethan, I picked up my suitcase and walked out the door, my heart heavy but my spirit unbroken. I could hear Lillian's voice fading behind me, her protests falling on deaf ears. As I stepped into the cool night air, I knew I was walking into the unknown. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of freedom, a lightness that came from finally taking control of my own life. Path ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to navigate. And as I moved forward, I knew I was leaving the past behind, ready to embrace whatever came next. Moving in with Tessa was like stepping into a different world, one where laughter and warmth replaced the tension and unease that had become so familiar. Her apartment was a haven, filled with vibrant artwork and the comforting aroma of fresh coffee. It was a place where I could finally breathe. As the days turned into weeks, I began to piece my life back together. Tessa's unwavering support was a constant reminder that I wasn't alone in this journey. She encouraged me to focus on my work, to find joy in the small victories, and to embrace the independence I had longed for. One sunny afternoon, as we sat on her balcony sipping iced tea, Tessa turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "You seem lighter, Mon. Like you found yourself again." I smiled, feeling the truth of her words. "I think I have. It's been a long time coming." She nodded, her eyes filled with pride. "You've come a long way. I'm proud of you." We sat in comfortable silence, the gentle breeze carrying away the remnants of past burdens. It was a moment of peace, a glimpse of the life I was slowly rebuilding. But the past wasn't entirely behind me. One evening, as I sorted through a box of old letters and keepsakes, I stumbled upon an envelope addressed in Lillian's familiar handwriting. Curiosity piqued, I opened it, unsure of what I might find. Inside was a letter, the words carefully penned and surprisingly vulnerable. Lillian wrote of her regrets, her fear of being alone, and her misguided attempts to keep her family close. It was a side of her I hadn't seen before, a glimpse into the loneliness that had driven her actions. I read the letter twice, absorbing the raw emotion within it. Didn't excuse her behavior, but it offered a new perspective, a reminder that even those who hurt us are often struggling with their own demons. Later, I met Oliver for coffee, eager to share the letter and my thoughts. He listened intently, his expression thoughtful. "It's strange, isn't it? How people can be so complicated." I nodded, reflecting on the tangled web of relationships that had brought us to this point. "It makes you wonder about forgiveness and understanding." Oliver smiled, a hint of warmth in his eyes. "Maybe it's about finding peace, even if things don't go the way we hoped." His words resonated with me, a reminder that life was rarely black and white. As we parted ways, I felt a sense of closure, a newfound acceptance of the past and all its complexities. Months passed, and the seasons changed. I found myself at a family gathering with Oliver, surrounded by laughter and the joyful chaos of children playing. I watched as Oliver's kids chased each other through the garden, their laughter echoing in the warm afternoon air. Among them was my son, a vibrant reminder of the future I was building. I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me, for the journey that had brought me here and the lessons I had learned along the way. As I stood there, watching the scene unfold, I realized that family wasn't just about blood or obligation. It was about love, respect, and the connections we chose to nurture. It was about building a life that honored both the past and the possibilities of the future. In that moment, I understood that true strength came from embracing all the parts of myself, the independent woman, the loving mother, and the resilient survivor. I had faced my fears, confronted the shadows of my past, and emerged stronger for it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the garden, I felt a sense of peace settle within me. The journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but it had also been a path of growth and self-discovery. And as I watched my son play, surrounded by the family we had chosen, I knew that the future was bright. It was a new dawn, a fresh start filled with hope and the promise of all that was yet to come.